Good evening. I'd like to call the meeting to order. And this evening we have seated Ryan Deasy, myself, Ben Filbert, Fred Dykeman, Lynn Conway, and tonight we have Gary Belkey seated because of Chuck's absence. Do we have a motion on the minutes?
Make a motion to approve the minutes as written. Second.
Thank you, Fred. Thank you, Ryan. Discussion?
No.
Details?
Thank you.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you. Any correspondence, Keith?
No. So we have administrative review items. Item 5D. 5D1 is PZ 2003 ZC SPA and CAM Mystic Seaport Museum, requesting approval for minor site plan modifications and/or minor building renovations for previously approved demolition of a 2-story restaurant building and construction of a 3-story restaurant and boutique hotel, guest cottage, utility structure, swimming pool, and the relocation of the dock office to Chubbs Wharf. Property located at 75 Greenmanville Ave, Mystic. Assessors map 173, block 1, lot 1, zone MHD.
The floor is yours.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, my name is John Casey. I'm a partner with the law firm of Robinson & Ford, and represent the applicant here tonight, Mystic Seaport and their partners, Greenwich Hospitality Group and Clearview Investment Management. It seems like a long time ago, but it was literally right before COVID, March 3rd, 2020. This commission approved the master plan amendment that allowed for a transformative project at the seaport, replacing the old Latitude 41 restaurant building with a new 3-story hotel, restaurant space, a guest cottage, and a utility structure up by the road, a swimming pool. As you can probably imagine, you don't have to imagine, as you could guess, that project's construction was delayed due to COVID, but now the team is well underway, moving towards final construction plans. And as they go through that process, they notice where items on the plans, the site plan, don't quite fit with how you're going to build this building. So we've applied tonight for your approval of minor modifications to the site plan. These are literally minor modifications. They do not impact the nature of the proposed uses at the property. The amendments to the master plan that you approved back in March of 2020, they all fall within the category of minor site plan modifications and/or minor building renovations. And under section 8.3.6.1 of your zoning regulations, they will not significantly impact natural resources, drainage, traffic generation, parking demand, aesthetics, or landscaping, buffers, community character, or quality of life. They are literally all within the same, nearly the same, just a slightly different footprint, and all interior to the building for the most part. With that, I will turn it over to Chad Frost, our landscape architect, who will quickly run through the changes, and together we'll answer any questions you have. Thank you.
Thank you.
Again, for the record, my name is Chad Frost, principal of Kent Frost Landscape Architecture in Mystic. I wasn't planning to go through every sheet, but if you want to, we can. I know you have a busy agenda. This is kind of our summary sheet, which is in your packet. It has the approved footprints of the building in bold colors, and then it has the revised footprints underneath, so that you can very easily see the minor changes. As John mentioned, we do think these are extremely minor building modifications. They don't significantly impact any of the things that are required under 8361. First, the hotel building footprint. So as we had to note, the building footprint was modified slightly. It's 216 feet of additional space. That is essentially the vestibule. That's all it is. For the hotel entry, underneath the covered porch, the whole covered porch in the original plan was open. Now there's one bay of it that's covered, or that's enclosed with glass as a vestibule, so that's the addition. So again, doesn't change the footprint at all, it just changes the actual coverage of it. Next, the hotel terrace area on the exterior. So this is the terrace that's on the river side of the hotel. A couple of minor modifications that had to be made there. The pool terrace needed to be reconfigured slightly because for the public pool code, we had to have a 5-foot area of walkway all the way around the pool. The pool that was approved 2 years ago only had a walkway on 3 sides and kind of an infinity edge on the 4th. So that's the difference of that 5 feet right there. And then there was a couple of handicap ramps that got added to make better accessibility, both between the hotel and the terrace level, and then also between the pool, and there's the exterior bathrooms. If you remember, there's 4 bathrooms open to the public on the outside. Again, to meet a public pool code, we needed to have access from the people in the pool to be able to go down there to shower before getting in the pool. So we had to add an accessible path.
How much bigger is the proposed new exterior patio swimming pool area than it was in square footage?
In square footage, just a couple hundred square feet, like about 600 square feet.
Thank you.
Right? And it varies. There's areas where it shrank. Like along here, we had a significantly larger handicap ramp that's now been reduced by about half. So it's moved around quite a bit, but it effectively is staying within the same footprint.
Thank you.
But is it 5 feet closer to the river?
It is about, not from the furthest point that was approved, no. From where the pool was, that area grew 5 feet, but there was areas past that that were not exceeding currently.
That were deck or something before, and
Correct.
now they're.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep. So there's basically a minor geometry changes to better increase the ADA circulation and to meet some of those Connecticut Pool Code requirements. The floor plans for the building changed slightly. In the basement, we needed more mechanical restaurant space. There was a very small amount of space, if you remember, in that original approved plan. As they got into it, we need to know how much refrigerator space, so we couldn't allow for any of the refrigerators and walk-ins and things like that a lot of times get outside of the building. Here, we're putting them all inside the building and in the basement, so that area grew slightly. And then the real reason we're before you is that as they got into the structural engineering of it, the column spacing actually shifted by about 6 inches. So when they started getting into it, that reduction between each column spacing actually added one more bay, which allowed for the increase of 1 room along the frontage. So the footprint didn't change, but they were able to get 1 more bedroom in along the front, and then there was an area on the side that was both a large suite and had a utility area that they were able to turn into a 2-bedroom suite. So technically, there's an increase of 2 rooms per floor. Even though the building didn't expand, it was simply just by shrinking each room by 6 inches because of the structure, 1 more room appeared, and then that one area, the suite, turned into, we're calling it a 2-bedroom suite because there is the ability to rent it either as a 2-bedroom suite or have 2 doors off the hallway. So we wanted to be clear that, and there's 2 floors of 2 rooms, so 4 more rooms. And we figured that's really what triggered us to come and talk to you, because that's an increase in room count. All the other modifications are really inconsequential, but we wanted to bring them to your attention as we came through it. The guest cottage modifications, so that was here. Again, an addition of 31 square feet, that's the vestibule. So there was no vestibule before, there's now a vestibule going in the front door. And so that was the change for that. Again, we don't think any of these are significant impacts at all. We did have our traffic engineer review it. That letter is in your packet where he found that there was no significant increase. I think his increase was a 0.25% increase on 1 hour demand, a 0.216, so very small changes that do not increase at all the traffic on the road generally. So that's my really short summary. We are able to take questions. I could go through each sheet, but again, we put them both on one plan so you could be able to compare and contrast, because the changes are so minor, it's very difficult to be able to tell one from another. There's the building elevations, I probably didn't cover, but there are a couple of windows that got added or moved and things like that. Again, if you put approved and revised side by side, it'd be very difficult to tell any modifications.
Any questions?
Was there a change in the exterior? The comparison, the plans seemed to show that the exterior was changing in appearance, but I don't know whether that was just because it's been updated.
It's just the drafting, right? So the approved plans were the rendered, prettier looking plans. The revised plans are simply the CAD plans. It's just all line work. There's no shading or hatching or things like that. But all the materials, everything that was in the approved plans, all that stays in place. So aesthetically, it looks exactly the same. Just a couple extra windows in a couple different places.
Question, is there any change to the exterior lighting from the original?
No.
So, the original was 26 rooms, and this
Correct.
is bringing it up to 30, so that's a 20% increase in rooms. I
Just the
mean,
rooms.
as an absolute number, it's 4, but it is a 20% increase. What does that do to parking?
It doesn't do anything, according to the staff report too. I mean, technically there's 4 spaces that would be required. We have a net reduction, if you recall, and during the approval, a net reduction of 62 spaces necessary from the existing to this proposed. So we still have a surplus of parking available on site. So technically there's 4 more spaces needed, but we have them on site. And the traffic generation, as indicated, is no impact.
Thank you.
Can you point out the room that was the suite that?
It's in this corner. I can show you a floor plan if you want to see.
Yeah, I'm just curious how the hallway door became to make that a room.
Of course, I can flip the wrong side, but, so this is the approved plan, right? There is this room right here was a larger suite, and then that was like the walk-in closet for the suite. And then this was housekeeping area.
Okay.
This plan now has a walk-in, same area, living room, bedroom, the bathroom, and then basically the housekeeping suite turned into a second bedroom for that suite. And we have a door that can enter in one and sell that as 2 bedrooms, or have a door in directly from the hallway. So that's why it's added it as a full second room.
And that's on both floors?
On both floors, yeah. And the other, again, right, so all these rooms are 480 square feet from that column facing here, they're now 361. So it's just that minor 6-inch shift basically on every single column, allowing for one more room on this plan, along that facade.
And the windows on the suite that was expanded, they don't face the water, right? They face in.
This facade
Internal.
stays, I mean, there's 12 windows here,
Mhm.
there's 13 windows here, because we added one room, right? Because every room got a slightly narrower. You go from 12 bays to 13 bays.
So one of the concerns that I think the commission had during the original proposal was basically light pollution, right? And the effect that it's having on the river, which is essentially dark skies at night. And the team kind of took that into account, and they used the special windows, which I wish everybody used, which was great, but now you've added an additional window. Am I right there?
You added an additional bay. The windows, I will say, if you dig into it, all got actually a little bit smaller. In the original approved, they were wider. So there's probably actually less glass area. I don't know the exact square footage, but the window bays got slightly smaller because there's 13, and then they also got smaller within each room because they realized that they needed some space to either side of the window within the room to have a chair.
Chair or something. Okay. Thank you.
The question I had was the architecture of the main building, not changing a lot. The architecture of that guest cottage in the front, it was at one point modified per the ADRB's comments to have this traditional appearance. And has a different appearance now. I didn't know if there was a specific reason for it functionally.
it could be the CAD line work. There hasn't been a noticeable intentional change from what was approved from the ARDB. There was the vestibule got added out. At one point, there had been a pergola kind of over it, and that has been removed. And otherwise, we complied with all of I believe we complied with all of the stipulations of the ARDB. And part of what we do have to do is we have not come back with those finalized plans. We're trying to do this so we can then finalize those plans and meet your final stipulations from the approval.
There's a chimney removed from that.
There was a chimney removed, yeah. And there's some ADA accessibility issues. There was a ramp that went on the north side of the building. We're now going to run it on the west side of the building. So some slight modifications.
On the east side, there's a tower-like structure for your stairwell. In the original plan, it has a little metal roof, I believe, with a little, like a lightning rod on top.
Of the hotel you're
Yes.
talking about?
Hotel.
Yep.
And now it's a flat roof?
It was always a pretty flat roof. I think it's gotten flatter.
I don't see any peak on it at all in this rendering.
Yeah, and there wasn't much of a peak before. It was just, from the ground, it wouldn't appear to have a peak at all. So that's probably why that.
And there are no windows on that cottage on one side now, I think? Or less windows on the roof? On the door?
Less windows, I believe, is on the road side.
On the dormer, there's just 2 windows now, when there used to be 3. And then the first floor was lots of windows, and now we're down to,
Correct.
I guess that's a glass door?
Yes. Yeah, it's really, so that's this facade that you're looking at?
Yes.
Really, that's the interior facade facing back. Yes, to have less windows.
Okay. Any other questions?
Why did you make that roof flat?
I would really have to ask the architect, but I know that as they've been going through it and working out the structural and the waterproofing and all that sort of stuff, there were some changes like that happened. But and then we have had a discussion about it at a meeting that visually from the road, from the eye height of a pedestrian, you wouldn't tell the difference because of the perspective.
But isn't that the side that's facing the water?
From which roof you're talking about? The top of the elevator shaft?
Yeah.
The top of the elevator shaft you won't see from the water. That's on the road side.
On the roadside?
Yeah.
Okay.
And the tops of buildings.
Kind of, yeah.
I do have just one hotel question.
Okay.
If I were to check in, where's the check-in desk?
The check-in desk, so where the vestibule is now, so
Yeah.
if you're pulling in, it's on the left-hand side. If you're facing the entry side of the
Can you
building.
point it out on your plan?
It is, so it's right here.
Okay,
This is the lobby.
yeah,
There's a main entry down the middle to the restaurant, and then there's a second or a third, I guess, over here to the corner. They're all are on the front porch.
okay, thank you. Keith, do you have any other
No?
comments? Do I hear a motion?
Make a motion to approve as submitted.
Were there any stipulations involved from the staff that you want?
No? None, and I have.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there a second?
Yeah, second.
Freds? Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So carried.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So that's it for old business.
So we reopen the public hearing?
Yeah, 7A, which was continued from last time.
All right, is there, we don't need to reread the whole,
I don't think so.
Just make a motion to reopen it.
Well, I think we can just jump into it.
okay, I'll declare the public hearing open and seated tonight, the same as before, Ryan Deasy, myself, Ben Philbrick, Fred Dykman, Lynn Conway, and Gary Belkey. The process will be, there should be a sign-up sheet by the front doorway. We'll first hear from the applicant, the sign-up sheet for public comments, I should say. Then we'll have the applicant, public input, in favor, opposed, general comments, rebuttal by the applicant if necessary, staff input, board questions, we'll close it, have a commission discussion and hopefully get to a vote.
And we did have public comment at the initial hearing, so technically it's, any new information, and there is a
Correct.
new groundwater protection permit that was submitted here.
Thank you, Keith. So the main thing that was entered is the groundwater protection permit application, is that correct?
Right. Which is on the agenda under a new submittal as item 9D for Brandon and Cynthia Flack.
Is there anybody here representing the Flack subdivision?
I'm here, Good evening, David Cooley, DLC Engineering, representing the Flacks. I'll just give a quick summary of the gist of the development, if you like. It's a 8 residential lot and open space development. It's an open space development under the definition within the zoning regulations that provides if 50% of the parcel is dedicated to open space, the other 50% can be developed in various ways independent of the zone restrictions. The conventional yield plan dictated 8 residential lots, so that's what's depicted in the open space development plans that have been submitted with the application. Each of the 8 lots are an average of 2 acres, and the open space is 21.3 acres. The wetlands are balanced between the lots and the open space. Ledgelite has approved each of the lots as suitable for septic. Private wells will be provided for water supply. And passive stormwater mitigation via rain gardens on each lot are planned. There are some minor comments that we've received from staff and from the town engineer, and we're certainly prepared to make those revisions to their satisfaction. And there were some comments at the last meeting relative to driveways, and we're combining the driveways as requested. So with that, I open it up to any questions or public comment. Or maybe you guys.
Any questions? Ryan? Fred? Okay. Missing Chuck's voice. Okay. Keith, do you have any comments?
Nothing other than the groundwater protection permit. Nothing new was submitted, no new plans to review or anything like that. The groundwater protection permit, in this case, is a bit of a technicality, being, sort of low density, single family houses. There's not much impact on the groundwater. It was referred to the Westerly Water Company. We didn't get any comment back from them. The one new thing since the last meeting we did get is the town engineer's comments, which he has comments to be made, mostly about, proving that the drainage and the rain gardens are adequate, but says that he recommends the commission take action with the stipulation that it be reviewed to his satisfaction after approval.
And you're okay with all those, Mr. Cooley?
Yeah, I took a first pass at them. There's nothing terribly significant or earth-shattering. I think it's just providing a little bit more detail.
Yeah.
I do reserve the right to follow up with some clarification questions with the engineer, but I think we can work through it.
Are there any comments from the public? For, against? General comments? Any other input, Keith, from the town?
We added to the recommended stipulations a couple on page 19 of the staff report. There are things that the commission mentioned at the last hearing. Number 8 was that driveways for lots 5, 6, and 8 shall be combined. And number 9 was a public access easement shall be provided over the dedicated open space and a portion of Lot 5 necessary for access with a minimum of 2 public parking spaces provided. I think that's what I heard from the commission.
Yes.
I think, Lynn, that's what you were,
And that was your intention, was all of the open space?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then we have one more stipulation, the 10th for the engineer, or is that already added?
That is already,
it's number 1,
that's
Oh,
already
there's
in
no-
there.
Okay.
I think.
Right.
Isn't it number 1?
Yeah, final plan, okay, then perfect. So 9 total stipulations.
Yes.
So as far as the votes to take, it's a decision concerning the requested subdivision waivers, which is, I believe, just the sidewalks
Hmm.
on South Inglewood,
Yeah.
which requires a supermajority, 4 out of 5 vote. A decision concerning the groundwater protection application, which in this case is a different application number, PZ 2220 GPP, and a decision concerning the subdivision application.
And can I just clarify, would it be on the subdivision application would be where you would want the stipulations attached?
Yeah, they seem to relate to that.
Okay.
Okay, do I have a motion to close the hearing?
Make a
So
motion to
moved.
close the hearing.
Thank you, and Fred, you're seconding it?
Oh,
Is that-
He's too fast. Okay, second.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, so moved.
I'll make a motion to approve the requested subdivision waivers as submitted.
Second.
Thank you, Fred. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay, so moved.
I will make a motion to approve the groundwater protection application as submitted.
Thank you, Ryan.
Second.
Thank you, Fred. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, and I'd also like to make a motion to approve the subdivision, application with the 9 stipulations that have been outlined in draft by the.
Thank you, Ryan. Do I hear a second?
Second.
Thank you, Fred. Discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? No. So moved.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Yeah.
Let's hold the record for the number of times I've been in front of us. Before we move on, can we connect the microphone and pick it up so
That's a good idea.
looking into it?
Thank you. Details.
Very difficult.
It's not a wireless mic.
Test 1, 2.
Oh,
We just need to raise it for Tori.
I guess that's
I don't know what
better.
the other wire is.
Pardon?
I don't know what the other
I
wire
don't know what the wire's for either. Okay.
Okay, so moving right along to the next public hearing.
Yeah.
So I guess, Lynn, you'll need to read this one in.
Oh, I will. Okay. The first paragraph as well? Okay.
I think so.
Pursuant to the general statutes of the state of Connecticut revision of 1958 and all amendments thereto, and pursuant to the zoning regulations of the town of Stonington, Connecticut, the Planning and Zoning Commission hereby gives notice that it will hold a public hearing at the Stonington Board of Education District Office, 40 Field Street, Pawcatuck, Connecticut, on Tuesday, June 21st, 2022 at 7 p.m. on the following application. PZ 2211 SUP Jeanette LLC special use permit application to permit construction of a one-story, 3,500 square foot convenience store with gasoline filling pumps and canopy. Proposal includes repaving, stormwater drainage, and associated site work. Property located at 54 South Broad Street, Pawcatuck, Assessors Map 14, Block 2, Lot 6, Zone LS5. This is continued from May 17th.
Thank you, Lynn. Seated this evening, once again, Ryan Deasy, myself, Ben Philbrick, Fred Dykman, Lynn Conway, and Gary Belkey. And I think I've gone over the ground rules enough times that we can jump right into the public hearing.
Good evening,
Good evening.
Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. My name is Attorney Zachary Cole, and my firm represents Janet LLC and its redevelopment of 54 South Broad Street, Pawcatuck. With me tonight is the licensed land surveyor on the project, Peter Gardner of Dieter and Gardner. 54 South Broad Street has served the community's needs as a filling station, service station, and convenience store for nearly 70 years. The existing 1,757 square foot building was built sometime in the 1950s of concrete block, and by appearance once had 3 service bays. This is the photo that is from the assessor's card. The building is past its useful life, and the owner, Janet LLC, is proposing to construct a new 1-story, 3,500-foot convenience store with fuel pumps, canopy, and associated repaving, and served by 19 parking spaces. I'll just note, as we go through these renderings, for simplicity, the detached sign and the canopy are white, but you'll see the Citgo branded logo and design as we go further into the plan. The property sits along the Route 1 corridor in the local shopping or LS5 district. We are right over here, and the site is this yellow spot right here. So it's not far from where we are today. In this area, you have retail, commercial, and residential uses. Just to the north is the Pawcatuck Shopping Center. And then there's some multi and single family housing before you get to our property. And then as you continue down, there's a service station, a filling station, the Pawcatuck Post Office, and Spruce Meadow Development, etc. As I said, the existing site has been used as a filling station, service station, and convenience store for many years, but is not currently in operation. I'm going to give Peter Gardner a moment here to kind of talk you through the current conditions of the site and the plan for grading and addressing this wetland area behind us.
Before you do that, could you just tell me the last time it was used as a filling station?
I don't have the exact date. It was by a prior owner, but the exact date I don't have.
Approximate?
I'd have to guess. I really don't know as to the date. I know if you go on Google Maps, there's an active use of it in 2008. It's been in gas station ownership, gas station company ownership all this time. The Hendel's company is in its iterations owned it, and then they sold it to PMG, which bought off all of those Henny Penny stations, and then we purchased it in 2021 in February and immediately began development
Thank you.
efforts. Thank you.
Good evening, Peter Gardner, Dieter and Gardner in Gales Ferry. What's on the screen now is sheet 2 of the plans. It shows the existing conditions, the building, the pavement, the island that's there, and the wetlands are out to the south of the property. A lot of activities taking place over the years on this property, and that includes things that were pushed around out back. We did go through wetlands and we received their unanimous approval. And the third sheet that I'm sure Attorney Cole will get into shows the detail of what we're proposing to do. The building, as has been noted, was about 1,757 square feet. And we're going to take water that currently just sheet flows off the site into the wetlands. We're going to put it through a storm drainage system that includes a chamber that will help clean it and then discharge it to the rain garden, which is to the west of the proposed building. The rain garden's been designed in accordance with the Connecticut Extension Service design standards, and that includes all the plant species that are proposed to go into the rain garden. And I'll let Attorney Cole take it from here. If I can answer any questions, I'm going to be right around the corner.
Yeah, so as he mentioned, there's a robust plan within your packet from both our soil scientist and our civil engineer that speak to the how that water will be treated through a storm scepter and the rain garden, and how that's all sized. The Inland Wetlands Commission, as he said, unanimously approved the project and recognized that there was not going to be an unreasonable harm or significant negative impact to the wetlands.
Was the old building in the wetland buffer as well as the new building?
Yes, you can see, I can zoom in a little bit for you to show you where the wetland buffer falls.
I can see it on this, I just want to make sure both buildings,
Yeah,
basically.
much of the existing building falls within the, so this curved line is your existing buffer,
Right.
is the wetland buffer, I'm sorry. And so the existing building largely sits in that.
And the new building is further south into,
Yes, it is further south.
thank you.
So the proposed project installs 4 two-sided fuel pumps with a canopy and a 3,500-foot convenience store further back on the 0.83 acres property. The site served by public water and sewer. As the safety protocols document in the application demonstrates, this project is being built to modern filling station design standards with robust spill prevention measures. There's a traffic study also included in the application. It indicates that the proposed project will not create a significant traffic impact. As the report indicates, much of the traffic will be from vehicles that are already traveling along this corridor. We received comments from the Board of Police Commissioners that there was a concern about the sight line for a left-hand turn out of the site. And therefore, this will be a right out only. Zoom in a little bit for you. This will be a right out only marked by no left turn signs and a right turn arrow. The sight line's about 40 feet short of that called for in the DOT Highway Design Manual, so that's why we've addressed that with this mitigating measure. I will also note, though, that the traffic report does indicate that it's believed that the traffic signal to the east up at the Pawcatuck Shopping Center will meter traffic enough to create additional gaps in traffic had we used that left turn. We've requested a waiver of section 7.10.5.2 of the zoning regulations of the loading berth requirements. That section allows for a waiver for buildings under 5,000 square feet. This is a 3,500 square foot building. The site doesn't allow space for a loading berth. Traffic has access to travelways on both sides of the canopy, both the streetward side and between the building and the pumps. And there's also parking at the pumps, at the building, and parallel along the frontage island, such that deliveries may be made adequately without negatively impacting parking. We've also indicated in our comments to the town that we will have deliveries occur after 8 o'clock once our traffic flow slows down, so it won't have an impact on parking. There was a recent question about, while we're on sheet 3, there was a recent question from the planning department about the location of the electrical supply line. As it's depicted in the plans to run through the underground storage tank space. That was an oversight. We'll relocate that line outside of the underground storage tank area, consistent with the building code. We also request a waiver of the water and sewer studies. The Water Pollution Control Authority reviewed the application and had no issues with the project. Our position is that the project can easily be served without impacting the water or sewer capacities. We request a waiver of those studies.
Excuse me, have the old tanks been removed, I assume?
Yes, the old tanks have been removed. That's spoken to in a letter from Sovereign Consulting.
Right.
They were removed in 2016.
There was no contaminated?
There was contaminated soils found at the time, according to that report.
Yeah.
But those were mitigated consistent with deep standards.
At that time.
At that time, all accessible soils were remediated. And the prior owner has the responsibility to address any issues that are discovered in this process.
Have you done any soil sampling, new soil sampling to see if there are any?
So the soil sampling that they did was done in the area of the tank grave. If we go back to the the existing conditions, those tanks were located along this side here of the building. Soil sampling was done there and in the location of the old pumps. If anything is discovered that was inaccessible, such as under the existing building, that will be addressed consistent with the standards.
Thank you.
Yes. Sorry. Getting back. Getting back to my notes, sorry. There are no public sidewalks in this section of Route 1 on the applicant's property or those abutting. The project is going to reserve space for sidewalks to be built by the town, as the town has a sidewalk plan for the area. Here I have highlighted, tried to better clarify this sidewalk reservation. What you see in blue is an overlay of the town sidewalk plan that accounts for existing conditions. We are going to be enlarging this island from what is currently there. So what we've done is we have extended what is in green, this hashed area, which will reserves the space for sidewalks consistent with what the town has requested. We'll work with the town to define the exact location of the sidewalk for the final plans and provide a sidewalk easement after that location is defined. I will note while we're here, because we're going to go to a couple other pages, that this sidewalk reservation area looks a little different on some of the renderings and the landscape plan. Those differences don't affect the plantings or anything on those pages. So this is just sheet 4 if we need it. So moving on to the architectural drawings. The design of the building complements its context and serves as a transition from the Pawcatuck Shopping Center to clapboard housing to us and other service and filling stations before the similarly appearing post office. The application before the ADRB was approved last Monday with 2 conditions, and we believe the project is much improved with the ADRB's advice over 2 meetings. Your materials have the stamp of the architect. I couldn't get that to fit on here, so just in case there's any note to difference. The pitched shingle roof with clapboard siding and a stone facade are designed to contribute to and be in harmony with the Stonington architectural look, and we've used stone that is in keeping with a stone facade in keeping with the stone of the area. You'll also see here that the signage is understated but conforms to the town signage regulations. In the immediate area, the style of the building will mimic characteristics of businesses, public buildings, and residences nearby. There's just a lighting plan sheet that's included. So now on to the landscape plan. With the advice of ADRB, we have developed a robust landscape plan softening the public edge boundaries in the building. We've achieved that by including arborvitae along the east and west property boundaries or a similar species. We've added a yew hedge that's here along the building side of the sidewalks, and then in front of those will be daylilies. And then we've added planters, which are a little small. They're the little circles in front of each pump, as well as 2 planters on either side of the front of the building, which will soften those locations as well. Those will be planted up with annual plantings and switched out. We've also added 3 river birch trees to either side of the building, and which we will uplight if possible, as requested by the Architecture Design Review Board. And then you also have a lot of trees from the wetland area and just out in the upland a little bit that will be remaining on the site. So it kind of provides a little envelope for the building. This is the signage for the building. The building signage will be externally illuminated. And as I said, earlier materials had the signage somewhat larger. This falls under the 35 square feet allowed under the zoning regulations, comes in about 34. This is just those signs in their locations. And then here we have the logos and signage for the gas island canopy and the street signs. So the two to the left are what the gas island canopy will look like. The signage on the canopy is approximately 48 square feet, which is what is allowed for this would be allowed for this 96-foot wide structure. We don't have the exact measurement, but are willing to stipulate that the Citgo name, the logo, will not exceed that 48 square feet. Also, the logo will not project above the roof. If you look at this side view, as designed, it projects just slightly over the roof line. We're willing to bring that logo smaller to be in conformance with the zoning regulations. All gas stations in town have canopies and have signage on them, or many of them have most of them have canopies, and those that do have signage on them. And we submit that it's a reasonable interpretation of the signage regulations to treat the canopy as its own building, as town staff had suggested, with its own signage allotment. There were 2 street signs, so this is the detached street sign for the location. There were 2 submitted with the application. We'll be using option 1, for which the dimensions are correct. The applicant will be utilizing and modifying the existing illuminated sign, the posts and the conduit and pad that are there, which exists under a zoning permit from 1998. And this, the signage that's contained here falls under the 50 square feet allowed under that permit. The proposed filling station and convenience store enhances its surrounding area while improving the runoff conditions on the site. We'll reuse the site and add to the economic health of this corridor, and the project is consistent with the town plan, and the applicant requests your approval of its application.
Is there any public input, do you know, Keith? Thank you. Any quick questions while we're waiting for that?
I just, you said deliveries were made off hours.
Not off hours, so the hours proposed are
6 to 10.
6 a.m. to midnight, and we're talking about after it slows down, so after 8 o'clock is when we would do those deliveries.
It's not for gas and for food things? You said
No, I was speaking to the gasoline, because that's where you've got, you know, the pumps and everything.
I'm sorry, so the store will be open till midnight? So?
Yes, that is what is proposed.
And Keith, maybe it's, if you go to our report, page 24, it says, you know, the contaminants were found in 2016, and then it says an area of remaining soils was found to still contain compounds below deep thresholds. It just reads a little weird to me. So it's still found to,
Yeah, that's what their report was saying, was that technically there's still some contaminants there, but they're below the level
so that's.
that
what that-
DEP requires you to
Okay.
clean them up.
I just- okay.
It's not clean.
I have one general question. Do any gas stations have now charging stations or no?
Some do.
Some do?
I know Bill Sweeney's here. One of his projects recently in East Lyme that I've seen has a few
Okay,
charging
yeah,
stations that
curious.
they've proposed. So some of them are adding them to
Right.
to the parking spaces essentially.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll get to the public comments section. I'm not sure, 4 people signed up. I'm not sure what category they might fall into, so I'll just read them off. Peter Lazari, is it, of Gales Ferry?
Peter Gardner.
Oh, you're Peter Gardner, okay.
Sorry about that.
That's right. Zachary Cole,
That's me.
that's you. John Chase.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, Commission members. My name is John Chase. I'm an attorney with a professional business address of Post Office Box 4 in Oakdale. And just for the record tonight, I'd like to make sure you spell my name correctly. It's C-H-A-S-E, and I say that because this is one of those serendipitous occasions when my longtime friend, Attorney Casey, is also present in the room, and we're sort of wearing the same uniform tonight. And so I just want to make sure that we get the respective names correctly. With me tonight or I should start out by saying that I represent Alden Associates Limited Partnership. Alden Associates is the owner of neighboring property at 60 Broad Street, or rather 60 South Broad Street.
Which direction would that be in?
That would be west of the property in question, not the abutting property to the west, but one further down.
Okay.
And I'm prepared to discuss a number of aspects of this application. My client opposes it. I brought with me tonight Mark Temple, our engineering consultant, who is going to lead off in more specific detail some of the concerns that we are raising. I would state that I do generally agree with my colleague Attorney Cole as to the procedural history of this matter so far. It has been before the Inland Wetlands Commission. However, that decision is under appeal. One of the issues, as a matter of fact, are the findings that were made by the commission that Attorney Cole made some reference to. So while it is true that that approval was granted by that commission, we may be some time yet before we know the final outcome of that decision.
Is there a date set for that, do you know?
As a matter of fact, I just submitted a brief in the matter. We have an upcoming date, I believe, in late July, is it that? July 19th. Well, exactly. And the way that process works is that on that date, the parties will appear before the court to offer testimony as to certain limited aspects of the appeal. The court will then have 120 days to decide, and if it doesn't decide in 120 days, further steps can happen. So I don't expect an immediate result.
And just, excuse me, one more time.
Yes.
For my clarification, my muddled mind, Pawcatuck Auto Body sits in between the applicant's property and the one you're representing?
And 60 Broad Street,
Okay.
that's correct.
Perfect,
yes.
thank you.
And I will address, after Mr. Temple does, a little bit more about the relationship or the locational relationship of those properties. But yes, you are correct, Mr. Chairman. So without further ado, at the moment, I'd like to introduce Mark Temple, who's going to be providing a little bit of background. He's going to be presenting a written report that he's put together and providing some testimony about our view of this application. And I would then ask to reserve a little bit of time to follow up with some further presentation to you. Thank you.
Thanks, John. For the record, Mark Temple, Leonard Engineering. We're a 20-person multidiscipline and hydrogeologic consulting firm based in Glastonbury, have an office in Winstead as well as Auburn, Mass. I'd like to give to you a copy of my written remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. It's Exhibit 2 for the record.
So with respect to my experience, I have 34 years of experience working on petroleum facilities. That's mostly gas stations, but also bulk fuel terminals here in the state of Connecticut, as well as Massachusetts and New York. And I probably worked on hundreds of gas stations in Connecticut, perhaps 10% of all the gas stations in the state over my 35 years or so. I'm here to speak tonight on this special use permit application that was submitted by Jeanette LLC for the property at 54 South Broad Street. Last year, I testified before the Stonington Inland Wetlands and Watercourses Commission about my concerns that the development would have on the large Anguilla Brook system located to the south and southwest of the site. My wetlands experience comes from 11 years on the Glastonbury Conservation and Inland Wetlands Commission, where I'm the vice chairman. My comments tonight are really sixfold. One, the application proposes to demolish the existing building and erect a new gasoline station, convenience store, in a different location from where it is shown on the site plan revised on May 31, 2022. When you scale off the location of the dispensers at the eastern and western ends, so I've shown the gasoline infrastructure in green, the buildings in blue, north is up for orientation, same as the site plan that's been previously shown. The yellow outline is the property boundary. You can see that on the western end, the westernmost gasoline dispenser is up 44 feet from the property boundary.
44?
44. And on the eastern side, it's 45 feet. Your regulations, Article 2, Section 2.11, subsection 1 states that no, and I'll quote, no gasoline or diesel filling appliance shall be located within 25 feet of a street line or 50 feet of a side or rear lot line, end quote. It's clear that neither of those dispensers are 50 feet away from the side yard lot line. I've also attached to my handout figures 1 and 2. You can open to the figure section and look at figures 1 and 2, which are from the Stonington GIS system. Figure 1 shows that the site at a scale of 1 inch equals 100 feet, with the property boundaries overlaid on the 2019 aerial photography. And figure 2 shows the same with the aerial photography removed. My measurements are shown on there that are annotated on that figure and show that the former station owned by Hendel's met that side yard setback requirement to the filling implementation points. The same is true for the Sunoco branded station located at 60 South Broad Street. So if you look at those two locations on that plan, the older layout for the Hendel's location and the Alden Associates station right down the street, both of those locations meet that requirement. The current configuration proposed to you does not. I've also attached, let me also point to subsection 2 of section 211 of your zoning regulations, which states that, and I'll quote that, no gasoline or diesel filling station or automotive service or repair station shall be erected within 1,500-foot radius of any part of any lot used for these purposes. My measurements show that the proposed station is only 150 feet east of the existing Sunoco station at 60 South Broad Street. Figure 3 shows very clearly that the proposed station is entirely within the 300-foot radius that I had my surveyor place on that map. I'd also point out that to the commission that this regulatory subsection may also apply from the adjacent Pawtucket Auto Body station, which is recorded as a service station, not as a service station, as a repair garage in your assessor's records. So in fact, it may be that that additional site also gets the 1,500-foot radius. And I point out that the proposed development of the site is immediately adjacent, not close to 1,500 feet away. I've also attached my written comments to photographs, so if you go to the photograph section, that were taken on Friday, June 17th. The photos show that the property is being used by Coastal Roofing, Inc., a sheet metal siding, door, window, and deck contractor. I've also attached to my written remarks a, quote, notification for underground storage tanks, unquote, which is filed with the Connecticut Department of Energy and Environmental Protection on December 6, 2017, stating that the underground storage tank systems, that's the tanks, product lines, and dispensers, were last used on February 5th, 2009. All right, that's a submission to the Department of Energy and Environmental Protection by Hendels, the former owner of the property. That submission also states that, that all of the motor fuels were removed from the tanks on that date. These facts make the record clear. The location has not been a gasoline station in more than 13 years. And the more recent use as a roofing and siding contractor's office clearly shows that the prior gasoline station use has been abandoned. Point 4, tanks shown on the site plan, which are in green here, are a cartoon. My measurements, based on the 20 scale plot that you see here, shows that the tanks are 47 feet long and 7.5 feet wide. As an experienced tank system designer, the two most prominent manufacturers, Xerxes and Containment Solutions, do not manufacture a standard tank measuring 47 by 7.5 feet. The engineer's call out on the plan states that the tanks are supposed to be 8-foot diameter, 10,000 gallon, double wall split systems, each containing 5,000 gallons of regular and 5,000 gallons of super gasoline. Note that when you do the volumetric calculation for a 47-foot long by 7.5-foot diameter tank, you get approximately 62,100 gallons for each of those tanks. Those are tremendously large tanks. Yeah. That's a far cry difference from the 10,000 gallons that is stated on the site plan. The site plan depicts the gasoline tanks as located between the proposed store and the gasoline dispensers. This location will require that the fuel hauler who comes in to fill the tanks park on top of the tanks. And that will result in him blocking 7 to 8 parking spaces in front of the building. It will also result in those fueling points not being visible from the store. A typical drop of 7 to 8 to 9, well, not at 9,000, 7 to 8,000 gallons of gasoline takes 15 to 20, 25 minutes. During that period, when that truck is parked directly between the store and the dispensers, those dispensers will not be visible. Who knows what can happen? Spills, fires happen, not fires, but certainly spills happen quite frequently. If you look at figure 1, you'll see the location of the tanks at the Sunoco station. The 2 tanks are set far to the west side of the site, which allows for the gasoline hauler to easily park adjacent to the east of the tanks without impeding the station operator's view of the dispensers. That's the typical way that modern gasoline stations are laid out. This location doesn't have the room for that layout, and so everything is a compromise, including the safety of the customers who are pulling in to fill up when that fuel tanker is in front. The application has suggested that they would limit deliveries to after 8 o'clock at night. In my opinion, delivering fuel at the site after dark, which occurs after 8 o'clock, it's 6 months of the year, is dark, is much riskier than during the day when drivers are alert, and the station will never be as lit as it is in daytime. A 6,000 to 8,000 gallon delivery, as I said, takes 15 to 20 minutes, and during that time, the entire visibility to those dispensers is blocked. Besides the gasoline deliveries, this is a 3,500 square foot convenience store. It's going to get lots of other deliveries. Food, Coke, Pepsi, candy bars, bottled water, you name it. Every one of those drivers is going to park directly between the store and the canopy because there's no other room to park anywhere else. You've heard that they've asked for a variance from that requirement in your regulations because there's no other place for these tractor trailers. The guys who come in and deliver Coke have fairly large vehicles. The guys who come from US Foods, I don't know if he uses US Foods, but these guys are bringing in short tractor trailers or tractor trailers with food. This is a 3,500 square foot convenience store. It's going to see deliveries every single day, every single day. I note that he hasn't said that the food deliveries will occur after 8 o'clock at night because they won't. They're not open during that time. I think blocking the operator's vision to the dispensers is a recipe for a significant gasoline spill. The operator may come, or the owner may come and say, well, I've got cameras. Well, I've seen it in far too many gasoline stations. I'm sure you've seen it in there. He looks at his monitor and it's divided up into 9 different cubicles. Looks like Hollywood Squares, right? You see all of these different views. Most of them are in the store because they're trying to avoid somebody shoplifting. But maybe they have cameras on the canopy. There's no way that that operator who's trying to do cash sales, which are going to occur consistently, is looking at those monitors. So the end result is, while they'll say maybe the monitors are going to prevent us from hiding, the customers behind that fuel tank or that Coke delivery truck or whatever. The fact of the matter is he's not going to be watching them because he's too busy bringing up sales. I think I won't go on. I can certainly answer questions. I think I'll just end it there and say the design. I'm going to be very frank. I have a partner who is our chief of engineering, and he says sites like this are 10 pounds of what in a 5-pound bucket. And I think that's what this is. There's a lot being crammed into the site in which you're being asked to overlook issues that may come down to safety and certainly violate your zoning regulations. And with that, I'll stop, prepared to answer questions.
Any questions? Lynn?
I have a couple questions. So I just want to make sure that I understood what you were saying correctly. The tanks that are being proposed, each tank, there's 2.
Yes.
Each one holds 62,000 gallons of gasoline.
Well, they're calling them out as 10,000 gallon tanks. each. So each one is supposed to be 10,000 gallons, two 5,000-gallon compartments. So the tank, one tank, it's divided into two. It's fairly common today in the gasoline industry.
Okay,
That's what they're saying. It's written right on the plan. I highlighted it here.
Right.
But when I put a scale to these tanks, right, this is a 20 scale plan stamped by an engineer who says it's 20 scale. When I put a 20 scale to this tank, I see it's 47 feet long and 7.5 foot diameter. It's pi r squared times the length. That's 62,000 gallons. So this plan says that each of those two tanks is 62,000 plus or minus gallons.
so, that's what I understood you to say. Each tank has the capacity to hold 62,000. Whether
Based on the
it's,
size of what's
of
shown
course,
here.
right. So, I don't know too much about how tanks work. Do you usually, if you had a tank that had a 62,000 gallon capacity, do you only fill it to 10,000? And then does it still work, like because it's 20%
Yeah, so
filled,
as I tried to say, first of all, he doesn't want to buy a 62,000 gallon tank. Tanks cost about, they've gone up in price about 25%. They're about somewhere between $3 and $3.25 a gallon. So a 10,000 gallon tank's about $35,000 to buy the tank, a single tank. I doubt that he wants to pay $180,000 per tank. It's likely he meant that to be 10,000 gallons, but I'm saying, look, he scaled them to be this enormous tank, and it's wrong, which tells me he doesn't understand underground storage tanks, and he's asking your fire marshal, I assume, to sign off on this. I mean, we do a lot of design work for municipalities where the fire marshals these days they don't want to sign off because they don't understand how the systems work. They're complicated. And so they ask that an engineer stamp it. Well, you've got an engineer stamp, but I don't think he understands underground storage tanks.
I see what you're saying. I see. Okay. Thank you.
So how big is a 10,000 gallon tank?
They're roughly 22'6" long, I think. I think that's about right size for a typical 8-foot diameter, 10,000 gallon tank. But it could be 24 feet long, but it's in that 22 to 24 foot long neighborhood.
But using them could solve the setback issue.
No, the setback issue that I'm talking about relates to the dispenser. So the tanks are here.
I'm sorry.
According to the applicant, 4 double-sided dispensers out here.
Okay.
That dispenser is the one that is violating your code. They need to be moved in to meet the requirement.
Thank you.
So basically, if I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, either this is totally wrong, somebody made a mistake, stamped it, it's wrong. So we have the possibility of approving something that has a stamped wrong site plan, or it is what they plan to do. And then we have the possibility of having two 62,000 gallon tanks, and you gotta say
Yeah, I think
why.
the answer is you don't
Okay.
see 60,000 gallon tanks except for at truck stops. So if you go up on the Mass Pike or those tanks that they have in the ground, they are likely to be 40 or 60,000 gallon tanks, or maybe even a little larger. But they're selling hundreds of thousands of gallons of fuel every day.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure Best Way would like to do that. There would be lines for miles down the road in order to be able to do that. So, that's not what their expectation is. I think their expectation is there's supposed to be 10,000 gallon tanks to 5,000 gallon compartments.
Can I ask a question? You mentioned that in the current design as it's shown, regardless of the tank size, in order for those tanks to be filled, the truck itself would actually have to stay on top of them while that's doing it? Is that considered an allowable practice?
Yes, I have a little truck here that I scaled, and
That just seems awfully odd to me.
right? So trucks the way they deliver is that there's a tank part of the truck, and they gravity feed from about the center.
Yeah, I see it down in the shell. I'm just
Yeah,
wondering,
okay.
but they're always off to the side.
Right,
Not
so,
sitting on top of the tank.
so the gravity feed comes out of one side of the trailer.
Okay.
And in order, depending on where the fills are on the tanks, they're usually not on the ends, they're usually about a third of the way in or so on one end of the tank or the other, and we try to put them both at the same location. You know, you don't want to get in trouble with the hauler and have the fill on the unleaded and the fill on the super at opposite ends because he may not be able to reach. They get mad, they have to move the truck ahead, take all their hoses off, you know. So they want to be able to fill, drop that product, and then move it to the next tank over, connect to the super compartment. Those tanks that you see going down the road have multiple compartments. They're typically 2,500 gallons. That's how they divide up the super and the unleaded. And so he'll connect to one of his compartments, open the valves, and drop into that tank. So they typically, you know, on the end here, or on the end over here, and he's gonna pull his truck about halfway so that he can gravity feed that fuel. But when he does that, he's blocking
No, understood,
everything.
that's why.
It's, you know, the turning radiuses on those trucks are very large.
And do the pumps work at that point? So if somebody were filling their,
Yes. Yep, they're still selling gasoline while they're filling. So I just want to reiterate the point about the 1,500. Nobody has asked that question, so I'll reiterate it. You know, we have a concern about your regulations that say that no station can be erected within 1,500 feet of another station. In fact, maybe within 1,500 feet of a service garage. We think that the Sunoco station certainly qualifies as another service station, and that the Pawtucket Auto Body may qualify as a service garage.
How long
Neither.
has the Sunoco been there for, do you know?
Yes, so it belonged to the Castles, and it was sold to Alden in '82. My recollection is that it was built in the early '70s, maybe the mid-'70s.
So in 2007 or 8, they both were there.
In 2007?
In 2007, if the property at 50,
The property
both
we're
stations
discussing
were
was
there,
a
they
gas
were breaking the
station,
rules
too.
back then, right?
That's right, both of them complied with the zoning regulations at the time. All the station, they moved the tanks over to the west. The tanks are not part of the way your zoning regulations are constructed, but I talked about them because they've taken safety into concern, and they've moved the tanks as far over as they can so that you could fit 3. It's not only, but if you look at your figure, you can see you could fit 3 tractor trailers between the edge of those tanks and the front of the building, side by side. So they've taken into account the safety concerns for delivering product. And that tractor trailer is well off to the side when he's dropping product at the Sunoco station. That will not be the case at this proposed station.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you, Mark. Again, for the record, it's John Chase, again, representing Alden Associates Limited Partnership. I have some handout materials for the record in support of a couple of the things that Mr. Temple made reference to. Mr. Temple commented on the uses of the 54, or the use rather, of the 54 South Broad Street property as revealed not only through photographic evidence, the lack of use, for a considerable time as a gas station, and also the current use for other purposes. He referred, as I said, to your assessor's records, where the land use for the property is described as that of a commercial garage, not a gas station. So clearly the assessor, through several assessments, revaluations over the last 13 years, I think was the period Mr. Temple referred to, no longer considers that to be a gas station, and I would certainly suggest that based on photographs you've seen that while it may resemble a historic gasoline station, there are certainly no facilities present that would indicate a continued use as such. Mr. Temple also referenced the property immediately next door, 56 South Broad Street, which is operated as Pawcatuck Auto Body. Your assessor has designated or has referenced the use of that property as auto repair. Again, that dovetails into Mr. Temple's comments earlier about how we certainly believe that the auto repair facility next door may also invoke the 1,500-foot distance requirement that 60 South Broad Street certainly does also under section 2.11 or 2.11.2 of your zoning regulations. That being said, it's always possible over the years that variances are obtained of the requirements of zoning regulations. So we checked. In fact, we commissioned a title search because under Section 8-3 of the general statutes, any variance granted by your zoning board of appeals would be ineffective unless it had been recorded on the land records with certain additional requirements, a certified copy, a statement expressly indicating the impact or result of the variance as applied to particular property. And so I have to apologize since this document is rather voluminous and I only have several copies, but I will submit for the record a copy of a title search that I commissioned from AB Titles LLC. It contains all of the relevant deeds that are referenced and indexed in the rear of the compilation, and you will find nowhere a variance either of the 1,500-foot distance requirement or of the 50-foot side distance requirement to the gas pumps and other dispensing structures. So I'm going to submit a copy of this to the record with apologies that I don't have one for everyone. I will provide a copy to you.
I'll take one. Yeah.
Single copy.
Okay, I'll look at it, we'll pass it around.
And if the commission would wish to hold open the public hearing for the specific purpose of my providing enough copies of that document for everyone, I would be glad to do that if the commission feels it's necessary. It's also important to bear in mind that in addition to the ultimate approval of the Wetlands Commission, in this case, the decision that was made recently being upheld by the Superior Court, if that's what transpires at some point in the future, that besides that, and besides your approval tonight, if the commission, or in due course, if the commission so chooses, these are not the only things that the applicant is going to have to satisfy in order to sell gas at this location. And one of those additional things has sort of obtained new prominence very recently among members of the land use bar, and that is the statutory requirement under Title 14 of the general statute, specifically Section 14-321, for a certificate of location approval from in this case, the Zoning Board of Appeals. There are different requirements for different types of auto-related or gasoline-related facilities and where those approvals come from. There's even a location approval for junkyards, as I recall. But in the case of gasoline stations, as a preliminary, in order to obtain a license from the Commissioner of Motor Vehicles to sell gasoline at the site, the applicant will need to come before the Stonington Zoning Board of Appeals for a certificate of location approval, again, under 14-321 of the general statutes, and your own regulations reference this process at, I believe I made a copy of the relevant page. Yes, 8-10.5 of your regulations reference that process. Now, in an interesting turn of events over the years, the general statutes, that is to say the legislature, once provided in an accompanying statute that's now been repealed, a set of performance standards for the local authority to evaluate in issuing that certificate of location approval. In the case of gasoline stations back in the early 2000s, a little bit later from the same process that took place in the case of location approvals for auto repair shops, as I recall, the legislature repealed the statutory performance standards, didn't replace them with anything, and left in place the requirement for the certificate of location approval. Again, as I said, in this case from the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so for a long time, most of us who deal on occasion with these things based on lower court decisions, based on almost a process of elimination since the legislature had eliminated its own set of standards, had concluded, and I know I myself had argued in the case of a similar application at one time, that all that's left would be for the Zoning Board of Appeals to make a determination that the use is either allowed under the zoning regulations, or it's legally non-conforming, or it's not, in which case the certificate shouldn't issue. However, very, very recently, in a decision released on June 14th, just a matter of a week ago, the appellate court, Connecticut Appellate Court, in the case of 1 Elmcroft Stanford LLC versus Zoning Board of Appeals of the City of Stamford, took the opportunity, which really hadn't been presented before the appellate court in quite a number of years, of interpreting the statutory location approval requirement in light of the repeal of the legislative standards, and stated that, to the contrary of what most of us thought, the process, as a result, is not a rubber stamp. It's not for the ZBA to say, oh yes, it was okay with the Planning and Zoning Commission who issued a special use permit, therefore the use is allowed here and we therefore approve it. To the contrary, the appellate court stated that in the absence of regulatory standards, in other words, the prior legislative regulatory standards, that the local authority, that's to say the Zoning Board of Appeals, must determine in their discretion the factors which are relevant to the decision on whether to grant a location approval. So that's to say that even if there are factors that reach beyond your zoning regulations that would convince the Zoning Board of Appeals not to grant this approval, it might do so. So what I'm suggesting, and in fairness to the applicant, this really hadn't been made very clear by the appellate court until quite recently, that what's going on here is putting the cart before the horse. That there's been no application yet, no decision yet from the Zoning Board of Appeals saying that, in effect, yes, a gas station at that location is a good idea, taking into account traffic and turning and various factors that go beyond those even mentioned by Mr. Temple. Safety, should there be more gas stations in the area? I don't know, and taking into account all of the circumstances, all of the relevant circumstances which the appellate court now instructs. So at the very least, I would suggest, in fact request, that for that reason alone, that the commission consider denying this application without prejudice to the applicant to come back and reapply once it's achieved that location approval certificate from the Zoning Board of Appeals, if that board is so inclined. On the other hand, for all of the reasons mentioned by Mr. Temple, it's our position that this commission must deny the application. I don't say must because I'm trying to tell you what to do. I'm stating that under your regulations, which don't permit the erection of a gas station within 1,500 feet of another one, and perhaps within that same distance of the adjacent auto repair shop, that your regulations simply don't allow this approval, simply don't authorize this approval. And in addition, based on the plans as submitted, as Mr. Temple has taken the time to demonstrate, the 50-foot setback requirement from the side property lines to the pumps aren't satisfied here either. And as I've indicated, there's no reference, or rather no indication in the land records of a variance having been granted. And I researched the Zoning Board of Appeals decisions over the last, at least a year and a half or so, and I found no decision that might have, as yet been unrecorded in that respect. And finally, on one comparatively pedantic point, but nevertheless I'll mention it because Mr. Temple did. He noted that the applicant, this is I believe in the responses to the town planners' questions that were asked and then filed recently, have asked for the waiver of several requirements of the regulations in connection with this process. And I have to admit, I'll be very honest, I have not had the opportunity to read entirely the provisions, the specific provisions of the regulations for which these waivers are being requested. And I point that out for this reason. If your regulations specifically state with respect to one or all of the things that are for which a waiver is sought tonight, if the regulations specifically state that it's in your authority to do so, well, yes, by all means, you have the ability to make that decision. If the regulations in question do not specifically provide for this commission to waive such a requirement, then clearly what's being asked for is a variance of the regulations, which this commission is not empowered to grant. That's the purview exclusively of the Zoning Board of Appeals. And so I state that as really what amounts to a general legal comment, and I certainly stand to be corrected if each of the, and every one of the matters for which a waiver is requested do in fact under your regulations grant to this commission the authority to do so. And so I'm just a lawyer. Mr. Temple is the person who has the technical knowledge. If there are any further questions as to what he has said, and frankly as to anything I've said, I'd be happy to try and answer those to the best of my ability. But barring none, again, I'd emphasize that and perhaps there might have been some, but I would conclude my remarks by stating that we believe under your regulations, it's very clear this application has to be denied. And even if somehow you can overcome those distance requirements that have apparently not been varied over the years in respect to this property, that you nevertheless should deny without prejudice until the matter has gone before the Zoning Board of Appeals, who have the legal authority now, thanks to the appellate court, or thanks to the appellate court's interpretation of the legislative authority that was granted through the statutes, to address all relevant factors in its discretion in determining whether or not to allow a gasoline station to operate at this property. So again, I thank you, and if there are any questions.
Any other questions from the board?
Okay.
Thank
Thanks
you,
very
gentlemen.
much.
Thank you.
Before we get to staff input, is there a rebuttal, I'm assuming?
Maybe other public comment too.
Oh, I asked for it at one point. You think there's...
Okay. Oh.
I'll ask one more time after the rebuttal.
I won't go through everything that has been addressed, but just a couple of things, and then I would ask that we, or would grant a continuance to the next meeting to address some of the issues that have been raised. First of all, as to the distance from the abutting property, we can revise the plan to come within that 50-foot requirement. As it goes to being within 1,500 feet of another filling station, as you guys spoke to, I think it was Commissioner Deasy, these properties have been in operation together for years. And what Mr. Temple is speaking to is a legal question, which is whether we have a non-conforming use or that has been abandoned. And that is a question of intent. And it's not merely a matter of a discontinuance of use. I'd like to put something in the record to kind of explain this to you a little better and a little more clearly, and I hope to take an opportunity to do that. Coastal Roofing is not using this property. That was a temporary tenant at some point prior to our ownership, but that they are not in possession of this property. There is some old signage that remains from their temporary use of property, but they are not using the property. We'll be working on the tank location that he's talked about, seeing if there's another location that we can put it, and resolving the misunderstanding as to the size of the tanks that are going to be used. My understanding from my client is that it's two 15,000 gallon tanks. What was there before were two 15,000 gallon tanks of 30,000 total. So it's the same there. It's just a misunderstanding on the plans there. We'll fix that.
So that differs even from the printed word that's on the
Yes.
site?
Yes.
Okay. So
It's a misunderstanding with the client, so we'll clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so what I would request is that we continue this public hearing to the next meeting, or to the next regular meeting, to have a chance to respond to some of these comments and to revise the plans to address some of the issues that have been raised. I know all of you, I'm tired after 2 presentations of this, and so I appreciate all of us to look at it with a clear head.
Okay. Thank you.
All right.
Is there any public comment? I'll ask one more time. For, against, general comments?
I'm for it. Yeah.
Can step up and use the microphone. State your name, please.
Craig Hamilton.
Greg?
Yes, Craig Hamilton. I'm for it. I think it's a good opportunity for the town to get a dilapidated piece of property back up and running. I mean, it seems, I don't know, it seems like a good opportunity to me, and I'm for it.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I am an applicant. We built this site, we have no issue. We built in Legend, gas ferry is similar to the design. Because they are our competition, they can bring every piece of paper just trying to stop us that. That's all is matter. We bring in nice development. It's no different than the Liberty Street. You can take a look, Liberty Street, this is just similar. It's gonna be clean site. We're gonna demolish. If there is any contamination, we remove it. We bring revenue to the town. It's gonna be nice looking station. And if you guys have any, take a ride at the Rotary, North Stonington, we just built one. It's gonna be same thing. So there isn't, I've been here last 25 years in this business. We know what to do. We have never spilling any gas station. I understand they have an engineer, but I have experience 25 years too. And we run Preston since 1999. And just I bring it to the commission that these sites, we are locally on chain best way, and you can visit any site, take a look at it. It's no issue with that. That's all.
Excuse me, I didn't catch your name.
Amit Chaudhary.
And how would you spell your last name?
Choudhry.
Thank you. Anyone else?
It's John Chase again, representing the Alden Associates Limited Partnership. And I'm certainly not going to go further into comments I've made already. And while I do respect, I'm sure the heartfeltness of the comments that were raised by Mr. Chowdhury, I want to specifically make clear that we are here tonight not because we fear competition, but because we have an expectation that this commission would enforce its regulations and uphold its regulations that we have over the years, Alden Associates, relied on in the operation, maintenance, and general long-standing ownership of 60 South Broad Street. And so to suggest that it's only out of fear of competition or concern that we're here, we reject that. Competition is not regulated under your zoning regulations.
Understood. Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much.
Keith, staff input?
I mean, the majority of it might be saved till after the next meeting. But, I'll just say that the Wetlands Commission was appealed, so this application is at the applicant's own risk. So if this were to be approved by the commission and the court were to overturn the Wetlands Commission, they'd have to be, back at the drawing board and be back before you, or things would just be denied here. And, I think for the rest of it, I will defer to the next meeting, if that's all right.
That's fine.
Just two questions, Keith. When was this 1,500-foot spacing requirement put into place? Do you know?
I'll see if it's listed in here. It doesn't say. I mean, my guess is that it's been in there for a long time.
So, back to the time when two stations existed, you think?
Probably. I mean, whether that regulation applies to an existing or, I guess existing gas station that's being brought back to life, I'm not sure. It is more of a legal question. Whether the gas station was abandoned is a legal question too. We had that roofing company go in there without permits. The sign just sort of appeared there. The state statutes do say that abandonment is more about the owner's intent than it is time. And that's not based upon just non-use for a certain amount of time. So, that still might be an open-ended question there.
Lynn?
So I have a couple of thoughts here. First off, it says that we opened this public hearing on May 17th, and without an extension, it has to be closed tonight. What I am hearing is that the application has mistakes in it, big mistakes. And it looks like it all has to be redone. I personally don't see how that's an extension and not closing the public hearing and voting, and whichever way it goes, and perhaps, depending upon what happens, they have to come back with a brand new plan, or we say it's good enough, or whatever. But I'm just not sure this is just an extension because there's one, commission that still hasn't, weighed in on the decision. So I'm not sure an extension is appropriate in this.
So declining without prejudice would be a way
I mean,
That's what's sounding to me like the
flexibility.
logical option is to give the applicant the ability to come back. I think,
Starting all
again, it's
over.
just based, to start all over. Because honestly, what I'm hearing here, aside from just the concerns that were raised, safety and otherwise, and some of the other, the distances and everything else, these are legal questions, and I don't think we're gonna get them solved in 30 days, right? And I don't, so the best way to me, I think, to approach it is to deny the application with prejudice, or without prejudice, pardon me, and that would give the applicant the time to kind of reset, come back, get everything in order, maybe address some of the other questions and proceed in that manner.
I mean, I think it's sort of a due process issue where they're entitled to extend the public hearing because they haven't really offered rebuttal. They've just said, we want to continue the hearing to offer rebuttal. So if you just denied it now, you'd be denying it without really hearing their rebuttal.
But they've also said the application needs to be totally reworked. So basically, they've said
With a new site plan.
their whole site plan needs to
Right,
be
that's what I mean, with the new
reworked.
site plan.
That's, I don't know, I think that's a little bit different than let's extend.
Then the Seaport coming in for a couple of items.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they do have by state statute, the ability to keep the hearing open an extra 65 days. And from what I heard from them, I mean, it's, maybe moving the gas tanks in, clarifying the size of the underground fuel tanks, which, unless they change a lot more, doesn't seem like a wholesale redesign.
Yes, please.
Again, Zachary Cole. We're not talking about a wholesale redesign of the site. We're talking about addressing some of the issues that were raised in a more thoughtful manner at the next meeting. Where there are revisions needed to the site plan, we will address those. Where the site plan, the site plan can be amended through the process. As a matter of whether Attorney Chase mentioned an approval by the Zoning Board of Appeals, my understanding is that statute, I need to look into it, but that statute would allow this commission to make that same determination, that location approval. So I just need to I'll look through that, and being the lawyer, I'll make that the legal determination that you all are looking for. And as Mr. Bryan spoke to, the abandonment is, again, the purported abandonment of the use is something that I can address in writing, that speaks to exactly what he's saying, that this is a question of intent by the owner, not a passage of time, and an intent to give up, to permanently abandon, to relinquish a zoning right that it had. So I would respectfully request that we hold over the meeting. I would grant a extension to the next regular meeting, which I believe is on July 19th.
With a revised stamped site plan.
Yeah, if there are revisions that need to be made to the site plan, we will revise the site plan and submit those revisions.
Keith, we have room on the 19th.
We do, yeah. We only have a small public hearing so far.
Thank you.
I won't be here on the 19th.
Excuse me?
I will not be here on the 19th.
You're, okay.
I'm just going to state that, we asked, when was the last time this was used as a gas station? There was no answer. I said, how about approximate? There was no answer. Just because now there's questions about abandonment, etc., I'm just not sure that, I feel like the applicant isn't prepared, that this application was not thoroughly reviewed even amongst the members of the applicant team, because there seems to be some major mistakes on the plan that is stamped by the engineer, which makes me feel a little bit leery about the entire engineering process of this site. That's a huge mistake. And so I don't think it's just a minor revision of moving something 5 feet to get your 50 from what it is at 45. I think it's a much bigger, I think it's a total change in the application. So that's just where I stand on it.
Gary?
I would do the extension. I would give the extension.
Fred?
Well, I mean, they've asked for an extension, we can certainly grant it. We've got a whole month for this to be reworked, if that's enough time. If it's not, then we're gonna, and we still have questions at that point, then it's more likely than not we'll have to decline it. So I don't know whether declining it now without prejudice gives the applicant more time to do what they need to do. I'm willing to grant an extension, I guess.
And frankly, if you don't like this application and think it should be denied, I think, you know, your denial would probably hold up in court better if it was based upon, you know, more substantive things about the plan after they present it to you, rather than just saying, we're not granting the extension and you're out of time.
What do you think?
I think we should grant the extension. They have requested it. I think we deserve it. They have the right to come back and respond and provide the information. To be honest, I don't think they're going to provide a lot of information that's going to change our perception of this overall, but they do have that right, so.
Well, do we have a vote on whether to have an extension or not?
Make a motion to extend this hearing.
If it's 65 days, is that right, Keith? The extension?
That's how much they are entitled to, but, you know, they're not using that much just to get to July 19th.
Make a motion to extend the hearing until July 19th.
Yeah.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Gary. Is there discussion?
Approved.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Opposed.
Yeah. Okay. Hearing temporarily closed for the evening. I don't know.
Oh, do we have, because you said you want to take a break at 9 or?
I do. But we don't have to close this now. We just continue.
No.
Okay.
Yeah, you just.
All righty. At this point, I would like to take a 5-6 minute break just to stretch the legs and come back. Is that all right, Mr. Sweeney?
Yes.
Thank you. Underway.
Okay.
Thank you, Lynn.
PZ 2212 SUP Whalers Inn, special use permit application for exterior renovations and changes of use to include conversion of 5 residential units to 5 hotel suites and retail space to hotel office lobby, and permit hotel liquor sales for the Odd Fellows Building. Pursuant to zoning regulations, section 6.6.14, rehabilitation of existing buildings, and 6.6.20, height exceptions for roof structures and architectural features. Property located at 11 Cottrell Street, Mystic Assessor's Map 182, Block 4, Lot 4, Zone DB5 and RH10. Application amended, public hearing rescheduled from 6/7/2022.
Thank you, Ms. Conway.
Thank you, Lynn. Seated this evening, we have Ryan Deasy, myself, Ben Philbrick, Fred Dykman, Lynn Conway, Carrie Belkey, and I think everybody knows the ground rules. You happy with the ground rules?
Absolutely, sir.
All yours.
Thank you. For the record, my name is Bill Sweeney. I'm a partner and a land use attorney with the law firm of Tobin Carberry in New London, Connecticut. And as always, it's a pleasure to appear before you this evening. I know it's late and it's a little bit warm, so I'm going to try to move as quickly as I can through the application. But this is a public hearing, so I do need to build a record. Tonight, I'm here on behalf of Whalers Inn RE LLC, which is the owner of the Odd Fellows Building located at 11 Cottrell Street in Mystic, Connecticut. On behalf of my client, I submitted a special use permit application for exterior renovations to the building and interior changes of use to convert the 5 approved residential dwelling units within the building to 5 hotel family suites, and one of the existing ground floor retail spaces to a hotel office and lobby. This special permit request also includes hotel liquor sales to the guest rooms. Further, at the suggestion of your staff, we did amend our application. They had actually asked us to add an additional provision originally, and then earlier this month asked us to, or late last month, I think, asked us to further amend it. And so we've also requested approval for the project pursuant to sections 6.614 and 6.620, which are your provisions for the rehabilitation of existing buildings, as well as the exceptions for roof structures and architectural features, respectively. Joining me tonight is Paul Larson. Paul is the project architect. He's appeared before the commission before. He's going to walk you through the site plan in a few moments after I give a little bit of background. I also have with us Norm Tebow. He's the project engineer for the project. And I also have Amanda Arling, who is the principal for the building owner. As I said, I'm going to try to provide you some brief background and address specifically issues of zoning compliance. Mr. Larson's going to do the bulk of the presentation. He's going to talk to you about the exterior and interior changes to the building. There really is little to no site work involved with this project at all. This is the site plan, or the plot plan that we submitted for the project. Here, there is no changes to the site except for the addition, which is shown in gray, of a new code-compliant ADA accessible elevator shaft at the back of the building. So Mr. Tebow is not going to make a presentation, but if you have any engineering-related questions, he's available tonight. As you know, this property has come before the commission several times in the past, most recently being last year for the approval and then the construction of a 15-space off-street parking lot with landscaping behind the existing building to serve the retail tenants and the residents of that building. Before that, though, probably before any of you were on the commission back in 2007, the owner of the property at that time came before the commission for special permits, including a special permit under 6614, the existing building rehabilitation, to get the existing mixed-use configuration of the building, retail on the bottom floor, and apartments on the second, third, and fourth floor approved by the commission. And the commission actually granted that approval in 2007, and that approval was recorded on the land records and is still valid and exercisable today. If you go back and look at that approval included significant exterior renovations to the building, including basically cutting off the mansard roof and elevating it about 3.5 feet, and adding dormers on the sides of the building. It was sort of an unusual looking building that was proposed and approved. And again, that was approved by special permit by the commission in 2007. The residential units, the retail on the bottom floor was established. The 2 units on the second floor were built out. The 2 units on the third floor were built out, but the renovation stopped at that point. The roof was never actually raised, and the 5th and final unit that was approved for the 4th floor was never completed. My client, who's now the owner of the building, intends to complete the exterior renovation of the building, but upgrade it significantly. And we have got some, if you're familiar with the building right now, it is a fairly drab, sort of 2-toned yellow and green building with the mansard roof. What we're hoping to do, and what we'll show you tonight, is that we are going to try to improve the overall aesthetic quality of the building and specifically make it more complementary to existing Mystic architecture in the surrounding area. The renovations are going to adjust the roof line and change it from a mansard roof to a flat roof, which are treated similarly in your regulations. We're going to keep the overall height of the building the same at 46.4 feet. And we're going to try to borrow from many of the treatments that you see in designs on buildings like the Hotsy House at the Whalers Inn next door, which is in your architectural design review guidelines is pointed out as sort of the shining example of what the community wants Mystic to look like. In fact, when we went before the Architectural Design Review Board this spring for the project, they applauded the design that we're going to share with you tonight, and we have unanimous approval and support from them. As part of the overall renovation, inside the building, the 5 approved residential dwelling units will be converted to 5 hotel suites. Hotel suites are permitted by special permit within the DB5 district. And we also believe this will fill an identified need in the Mystic area for family-friendly suite accommodations. There's a lot of single bedrooms, hotel rooms, but there are very few accommodations in the greater Mystic area for families. And there is a desire in your plan of development and through a number of other planning documents to try to make Mystic more family-friendly. As Mr. Larson is going to point out, the new hotel suites are very similar in size and dimension to the existing units. They range from 884 square feet to up to 1,745 square feet on the top floor. These are truly suite-style accommodations for a little bit longer stays. One of the retail spaces on the lower floor, which was most recently occupied by Crop, the hair salon, is going to be converted. They vacated the premises now, and that will be converted to a hotel, office, and lobby to serve those 5 guest rooms above. The other retail spaces will remain the same per our submitted plans. Again, except for the limited disturbance for the new ADA-compliant elevator shaft, there is no site work or other disturbance with the project. Everything else on the site is going to remain the same. The proposed use has a parking space demand of 14 spaces, which accounts for the hotel employees, for the 5 guest rooms, and for the remaining retail spaces on the first floor, all of which can be accommodated in the 15-space on-site parking lot. And considering the fact that the units, the residential dwelling units that exist today or were approved, will be converted to hotel guest suites, and there's going to be no retail customers to the first floor area, which is now going to be part of the hotel lobby, we expect that there is a net decrease in traffic generation from the site, considering those hotel suites will not be occupied on a year-round basis. As I said, as there is no proposed site work, we really are focused on the building, and that's what our presentation will focus on tonight. Many of the typical type of site plan considerations that you have really aren't applicable to our submission, and we've requested multiple waivers as a result. From our perspective, our exterior modifications meet or exceed all of the bulk and dimensional requirements of the regulations. I want to point out specifically for the record that the change in roof line from the existing mansard roof to the flat roof does not increase the overall height of the building per your zoning regulations. We've added, as you're going to see on the 4th floor of the building, an open air terrace that overlooks Cottrell Street for that 4th floor unit, and that actually reduces the floor area of the total building of grouped over space. So our FAR actually decreases slightly as a result of the project from the 2007 approved plans. That being said, this is a split zone property. Part of the property is in the DB5, part is in the RH10. And so there is an argument that the building has a pre-existing non-conforming status, at least in terms of bulk and dimensional requirements, and it has to meet RH10 requirements. We believe we've done that. We believe we've demonstrated that. But in an abundance of caution, your staff had requested that we also apply under section 6.614 and 6.620, just because the previous project also applied under 6.614, which allows for modifications and flexibility in bulk and dimensional standards, and 6.620, which allows for height increases, specifically for mechanical equipment like the new elevator shaft, which we'll talk to, and which you'll see rises of up 6 feet above the roof of the existing building. We meet the requirements for both of those sections, so if in the event that you feel that either of those sections apply, we meet the requirements, and therefore this project is compliant with your zoning regulations. And I can go into any detail you request on those issues at a later point in the presentation. So at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Paul to walk you through the design and just show you what we're trying to do. And then I'll come back and just with a couple of closing remarks. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Paul Larson, registered architect in Connecticut. What I'd like to do first is kind of run through the floor plans, show you what we're doing per floor, and then from there take you to the outside of the building. I'll describe the materials that we're using. Then I can explain the existing and proposed building sections, along with a couple of streetscape views that I have showing existing and proposed. So I'll start off on the first floor. The first floor contains basically 3 units. There's the sunglass up here, there's a clothing store in the middle, And then this end unit here is where the hairdresser was that we're going to be converting into the hotel lobby and office. I think in your packet you have existing drawings. I don't have those on the board, so if you do want to refer to existing drawings, they are in your packet. And you can see the areas that we are renovating. As Mr. Sweeney mentioned, the biggest renovation to the outside, as far as space goes, is adding an elevator off the rear. And that will all be ADA compliant. I'm looking at a machineless elevator, a notice elevator. And off of that, I'm proposing a canopy, a covered canopy to a new entrance.
How do you access the elevator shaft?
From the inside. When you come in through here.
Oh, only, so you got to go into the building to get to the
Of
elevator?
course.
Yeah. Thank
No
you.
exterior entrance. The way the building enters now is through this door off to the side here. That is going to become an egress door. So when you come down the stairs, you just egress out. The main entrance is going to be into the central corridor. It's a little bit more spacious. We added some double doors. The windows there, but that'll add some extra light into this space so it won't feel so dark. Little extra space here we're going to use for maintenance storage.
Excuse me, is the current elevator not ADA compliant? Meaning, why do you need
Center of the building?
why do you need a new elevator shaft when there's a perfectly good one there?
Well, I wouldn't say perfectly good.
I have no idea.
The don't fit the elevators that we need. And
Is it ADA compliant or not?
There's no elevator there, it's just a shaft.
Oh.
And the shaft is not fire rated correctly, it's built out of wood frame. So we'd have to cut back all the joists. Generally, when you do an elevator shaft, I like to do it out of concrete block and rebar.
Right.
This was built out of wood. So therefore, there were some safety reasons, the economics of it all.
Okay.
And then by eliminating it, it gave us a nicer area on the other floors for a lobby.
Lobby, thank you.
But you could.
I don't know. There's a lot of work to do it if we had to do it, because they didn't build it correctly, there's no fire ratings to it. Could we? Maybe. It costs a lot more money than building one on the outside. There would be a lot more destructive areas, structural areas to that building by ripping it out, by supporting beams, other bearing walls, the roof. So it becomes a little bit tricky.
But you wouldn't need extra 6 feet of height to do it, would you?
We would need extra height because the way they built the elevator now, the landing to where it was planned to come up is 2 feet lower than the 4th floor. So that doesn't meet ADA. So then they get out, they need steps to get to that 4th floor. So therefore that whole shaft, technically to get the height requirements that we need, would have to come through the roof by 3 feet. So we added an extra 3 feet to that to finish it off and respect the Hoxie house with their floor that they have. So yes, we would have to penetrate the roof and come up higher, for sure.
Thank you.
On the second floor, the units are basically staying the same. We're not changing any of them. The elevator shaft was in this particular area here, which was removed and just added to the outside, which gave us a much open area when you come up the 2 existing egress stairs. That just doesn't feel so tight. Right now, it's very tight in those corridors when you come up. The egress is dark, so this is just going to open up this area much more elegantly. On the 3rd floor, it's basically the same. We have a unit here and a unit here. We're not changing much on those units as far as walls go. Again, the only change is the elevator, the new elevator shaft, and removing the existing. There is some areas where we're removing the stoves in the units, and we're adding under-counter refrigerators and installing microwave, but we are taking out the stoves. Getting up to the 4th floor is where the penthouse suite is. Again, the elevator is going to come up, it's totally accessible. There's 2 existing egress stairs now that are built that go up to that floor. It's a single bedroom suite with its own bathroom. And the front part is all open with dining, sitting, and living room. And then there's a big kitchen here with some storage. And then also to take up the views of the river and also scale of the building, created a L-shaped balcony off the front. And that serves as, again, 2 purposes. One, it lets people get outside and overlook the beautiful area of Mystic, but also as far as scale, it pulls that front facade back, so it doesn't look so massive.
That patio area balcony, whatever you call it, is not a public space?
It is not, it's private.
Not, okay.
It's private, it is unit.
Got it.
I'm so glad you brought that up. To my mind, this building is very massive and bulky, and I really like the corner pocket you created on the southwest corner. I was wondering if there's any way to mirror that on the northwest corner, and you just lose one person's dining room table seat, as I see it.
We talked about that.
It would just
as a
reduce the
group and as a
mass, because
team.
that's the main viewpoint coming down Cottrell Street,
I agree.
you know?
We could certainly look at that. We did speak with that with our team, and we felt that it was best to keep that more as an open dining space and not take that space away.
One of your
Because
nicest,
it's really looking right at the Hoxie Hotel.
well, you're looking upriver too.
I agree.
Did I interrupt you, Brian? Did you-
No.
So yeah, I would really look into that, because otherwise, that's a pretty massive corner, that
Yeah, it's-
northwest corner.
I agree, and pulling it back certainly helps.
Yeah, I'd wrap it all the way around if it were me, but
We'll talk about that.
thank you for taking it under consideration.
Thank you. Okay, so that takes care of the floor plans. I will now get into the exterior elevations. You have the existing, I believe you have some photos there of the existing. It's a two-tone building, it's like you said, very massive, it's got a very large mansard roof. What we did, we looked at different ways of designing this roof, and to get the height that we want on that upper floor, we thought it's best to make a flat roof. We would gable roofs and all, and it was making the project a lot more complicated. So by going with a flat roof, we were able to get the height we needed. All the basic windows throughout the building are staying the same. New windows, but the size and location are staying the same. The facade at the bottom, I'll start there, is right now it's a painted yellow brick. We're going to strip the paint off and try to bring that back to a natural brick. And then all this detail in here is being revised. It's all built out of AZEK trim. And if you lay it, you have some nice detail and relief. And the detail is really based off of the hockey house, trying to tie the two in. You can see that when I show you the streetscape elevation. So these are all in the middle here are basically pilots that are built out with panel trim. There's crown molded on top. Above that, I have a small roof there that's supported off of brackets. That's going to support a lead-coated copper, slightly pitched roof. So that'll shed any water that's coming down on any of this trim off of this front facade. We're introducing shutters to again replicate the Hoxie house. Up on this top level, we're wrapping this whole balcony around, but the railing, half of it is a solid wall, the other half we're looking at glass. One is for privacy at the base, and the other using the glass, and when you are sitting in a chair, you can still look out and see the river. As far as the main body of the building's material, that's going to be a hardy panel. It's a horizontal cement-based plank board. I have a sample of it. If you don't know what it is, I can show you what that is. That's basically going to be a 4-inch wide exposure horizontal board. We're going to have corner boards that are going to be about 6 inches wide, and then banding at this area right above the 3rd floor windows. Again, just to break up the facade and the scale of the building. The deck is going to be all EPA wood, and at the top, instead of going with a horizontal side, we're looking at using, again, AZEK trim with AZEK panels painted white. So it has a lighter effect to it. And at the top of the roof, underneath the overhangs, we're bringing in some architectural brackets, again, to bring in the detail and to bring the scale down. At the elevator, these are going to be faux windows, probably scaled, tinted out black, with a hip roof on the top of that, which would be a copper roof with a finial on top. All basically AZEK trim at the top, but the base of the whole tower would be hardy panel as well. Those materials carry around to the left side, the right side, and the rear, and that same facade detail carries around the building as well. The small canopy that we are building off the back would have individual columns supported on a stone base, and those would be trimmed out in AZEK to match the columns that you see for these pilasters that are on the building themselves. The roof would be a metal roof that would tie into the elevator roof, which you probably won't see unless you're way down, as well as the small roof that's above the facade. And then I'm going to get into
Excuse me, is there any way to help break up that elevator shaft mass? It's just, any other kind of horizontal border between floors?
I can bring you some more trim, for sure, to break that up. Here, I didn't have any trim.
It needs,
So I didn't want to over detail that. It's kind of very simplistic volume, so
yeah.
I kind of wanted to keep it that way, and then put the detail to the.
Yeah, I appreciate the detail at the top. It just looks like a huge expanse to my eye, but that's me. I don't know what anybody else feels. But.
I see what you mean, yeah.
Yeah,
Something even just
I can
trim
look
the
into that
floor
for
to
sure.
break it up.
Where did you say you had the 6-inch trim?
The 6 inches on the corner boards.
So the massive size of this building and the corner boards are only going to be 6 inches?
Yeah, I mean, I can make them 8, but
I mean,
most of the time,
it's a huge building.
it is a big building,
It
but
seems-
there's a lot of detail in here too, so your eye is all over the place. And I don't think you pick up that 6 inches here is that small. There's so much detail here that, I mean, you could look at 8 inches. I don't want to go too wide because then it starts cupping, or then I have to start layering it for a corner board. Some of these areas, I have some big areas of trim and panels, so I have to break them up, so I don't get this walking effect.
Paul, how does the corner board compare to what's on the Hoxie house right now?
They have like 3-inch vinyl corner boards that get attached to the sides. So these are larger than what's there now.
I mean, personally, the Hoxie house, you keep on referring to it as if it's this great. But, go ahead.
It's listed as the sort of quintessential Mystic building in the architectural design review guidelines that I assume this commission reviewed and approved, so.
But go ahead.
How high is the elevator from the top of the building to the top of the elevator?
This dimension here?
Yeah,
6 feet.
6 feet.
And that's not accessible by customers. The cupola.
No.
Just the service repairman gets to go up there.
When the elevator shaft is built, there's a certain clearance to the bottom of the hoist beam that I have to keep.
Right.
That brings me up past the roof.
Gotcha.
So I just added a foot to finish it off so it didn't look so squat.
Right.
Question, my understanding of a mansard roof is a very steep pitch part way and then a shallow pitch the rest of the way. This doesn't look like a mansard roof, but calling it that gives you the height you need. Am I right?
The old one.
Yeah, but this is not a mansard roof.
No, the original, the existing.
Original one, yes, it is.
How do you figure that?
This is the mansard roof that exists now in building section. This is what we're proposing. So this height doesn't exceed that.
No, I'm looking at the style of the roof, and that is not my understanding of what a mansard roof looks like.
This is the first angle right here, the steep angle, and then you have another angle to the point, which is almost horizontal. I mean, it's just a few degrees up. So there's two pitches here. There's this pitch, and then the point comes up to the middle. And more importantly, it doesn't matter what direction you look at it. So if you think about like the traditional New England barn, that's a gable roof because you look at it to where the cows go in, and you see the two roofs that come up. But a mansard roof, doesn't matter what side of the building you look at, it does that all the way around. And that's why this is a mansard roof and not a gable roof, for example.
Well, the two pitches.
Two pitches, one steep and one, in this case, extremely shallow.
Which I never knew for over 40 years I've been here. I always thought it was a hip roof.
It's only that the water can run off. I mean.
Yeah, so you don't have a flat roof.
If you're thinking of mansard roofs like you see in Paris, this is not it.
Right. No.
Okay.
We're not in Paris.
I think you should also see, I think it's in your staff report, when Mr. Dismaris owned the building in 2007 and got the approval, he was going to literally cut the roof and lift it up 3 feet, and then he was going to put dormers in it, like they were like square blocks into the roof as well. So, it was a mansard roof there, but there would have been these I think it's a very bizarre sort of design, but I think there's a picture in your staff report, as I recall.
And this sort of debate over what type of roof it is why I recommended that they use this rehabilitation of existing buildings section of the regulations, because then it doesn't matter. Because then that part of the regulation says that if they're fixing up a building that's old enough and large enough, the commission can approve these modifications to the bulk requirements that enables that.
Is it simply the age of the building?
It's three things in particular.
Yeah, it's age of the building, the
Prior to
size of the building,
1961.
and also there's language about the architectural character and things like that, in which this is a
Building has to
contributing part of the
be
historic district.
pre-1961, has to be more than 5,000 square feet in size. It must not have an actual building addition put on it. What we have is equipment, which an elevator is considered mechanical equipment. So it meets all the requirements for 6614.
Right.
But again, from my perspective, we don't need that because it's a mansard roof and a flat roof are considered the same. And because of how we configured the fourth floor, we actually reduced the FAR, even though we're raising the roof in areas for the flat roof.
Well, no, I wasn't concerned about FAR so much as what you've got here is a 4-story building, which now looks like a 3-story building.
What I would say though is look at your staff report, because tomorrow we could build what Mr. Dismaris got approved in 2007. So what the real comparison is, in my legal opinion, is what we're proposing to what Mr. Dismaris got approved in 2007, which is a recorded special permit. Now, my client has no interest in developing what Mr. Dismaris got approved because we just don't think it looks, we don't think it matches the type of appearance that we're trying to convey.
Any other questions?
No.
Will there be any disturbance to the basement?
No.
There is no basement. They're all slab on grade.
It is?
No, there's a basement.
Oh, there is a basement?
There's a basement. There's no disturbance to the basement. Oh, yeah, over here there is.
So
Yeah.
even with that old elevator shaft, where I'm going with this is the old pollution from the former dry cleaners.
Yeah, that's a great question.
Wondering if in demolition of the former elevator shaft, you'll be messing with any of the dirt?
No, in fact, in part of the purchase of the building, which I was involved in, we had to get updated environmental sign-offs on that. So back in the day, a long time ago, there was a dry cleaner in the bottom of the building, and there was a plume that had been released, and that has been naturally attenuated now.
Oh, it has, okay.
As a result of time. So I heard something earlier tonight, like, well, there's contamination still in the ground and it just gets to stay there. Well, yeah, it does. And if it's below a guideline, and then natural anaerobic processes, bacteria will eat that contamination and basically remediate it over time. So that was part of the due diligence we did before we bought the building.
Is that what that vent is that goes up from the basement to the roof?
Yeah, exactly.
So will that have to stay?
I believe it may have to stay. I don't have an answer to that, but I could get you the answer.
That might help break up the elevator shaft.
I mean, we're more than happy to provide some additional trim on the elevator shaft. And I can also say, Mr. Philbrick, I spoke with my client's representative. If you would like us to modify the balcony on I guess it would be on the side of the building closest to the Hoxie House.
Northwest.
To make it more mirror-like, the other side, we're happy to do that too. So that would be a condition of approval. We don't have an objection to that. So, it was something that we looked at before, and it was just an alternative that we considered, but we're open to that if the commission thinks it would be more attractive.
The fan doesn't exist anymore.
Excuse me?
The fan doesn't exist anymore?
Just put your name for the record.
Yeah, Mark Spruance. The fan that you're talking about, that doesn't exist anymore. It doesn't have to, because we core bored the inside of the building, which had been excavated and all new soil put in.
Oh, good, okay.
And last year, we core bored all the retail spaces, and it came back no contamination.
Clean, okay,
So
perfect.
the environmental engineer said we could remove it.
Okay, because that was my question on the soils report, test pit data and mapping. You asked a waiver, and that's why I went down this path of questioning. Thank you. Perfect.
Are there any concerns with flooding of Cottrell Street?
Well, all of Mystic is within the federal floodplain, including this property and going all the way up, up toward Washington Street. That whole area is federal floodplain. The building has a very, very high value because of its location near the waterfront. So what we've done is the renovations that we've proposed, and this is in our application, we have certifications within our application too, will be below the 50% threshold for improvement. So we're not obligated to floodproof or elevate the building.
Interesting. Okay.
Speaking of floodplain, we've asked the hotel that's being built on the corner where Broadway Auto used to be and the hotel is proposed for the seaport, that they have an evacuation plan. Is that part of this project too? And
I'm going to ask Amanda Arling, who's going to be managing this hotel as well. And I know that she can answer that in terms of what she's done for the adjacent Whalers Inn and what we would do for here as well. If you could just kind of give your name and address.
Amanda Arling, the Whalers Inn. So we do have plans in place for evacuation. It is part of our overall safety protocols and procedures, and our staff do go through trainings. In addition to flood or environmental evacuation of other kind, it goes along with our fire evacuation plans, medical emergency plans, domestic plans, and active shooter plans as well. So we have a pretty extensive emergency plan and process in place.
And that will apply to this building?
We'll develop one specifically for this building based on what we've done. And we're happy, at least in terms of the floodplain, we're happy to give a copy to Keith and for the record if that's something important for the commission.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, man.
I was going to ask any other questions and open it up to the public?
I don't have any other questions.
Is that all right with you?
Yeah, that's fine, and I'll just come back and rebuttal and close.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any comments from the public that would like to speak at this time?
Bill Shear, 4 Haley Street. I think the going to suites is going to definitely change the character of the neighborhood. As a residential unit, it was quite quiet. You knew a lot of the people that lived there. With suites, you're going to wind up with more people in the parking lot. We know what it's like to live on the back side of a parking lot. And the other thing that bothers me is it's going to change the character of the parking lot itself. In my opinion, the parking lot should never have been approved as a mixed-use parking lot because it is a residential lot. The Oddfellows was residential and commercial, so it was mixed use. We changed it to all commercial, now we've got a totally commercial parking lot. I don't see where that's allowed in the zoning regulations. That's all I've got.
Thank you, sir. Any other comments? Amazing.
Again, Bill Sweeney for the applicant. Mr. Shear is obviously entitled to his opinion, and I respect it. A couple things. Tonight is not about the parking lot. The parking lot has been approved. It's been built. And it was approved as accessory to the building in the DB5 and whatever uses that are allowed in the DB5. So it is certainly fully approved, and it's really not at issue tonight. Meets all your requirements as well. I would also suggest that having 5 guest suites in the same location where you have 5 approved residential is actually going to have less impact. One, you're not going to have year-round occupancy of those 5 suites. In the summer, you'll have, certainly in the high season, the tourist season, those suites will be rented out. But in the off-season, you're going to have significant vacancies as well. And that's one of the arguments that I made in terms of traffic generation. Plus, you're losing one of the retail spaces for the hotel lobby on the first floor, so there's going to be less activity in general around the building. We also have much greater control over the 5 guest suites. Once you actually sign a lease with a resident, they have rights of possession, and they can be disruptive tenants. You have to go through a summary process eviction for playing loud music or for doing things that are inappropriate. They have rights, tenant rights, which they don't have in the situation of a guest hotel. If somebody breaks our rules and regulations, we can expel them from the hotel. So I think that's a big change. I think that's a positive change as well. I do want to take a couple minutes just in closing. I really do thank you for your time and attention tonight. When you review our application, you review it per the standards set forth in section 6.4 of your regulations. I do want to point out that your regulations have not been updated since the changes to Connecticut General Statutes 8-2. And I want to remind the Commission that the general statutes now prohibit the Commission from considering the impact of a project to so-called neighborhood character. And that's not a criteria that you can evaluate anymore based on those changes. You can do that if you meet certain guidelines set forth in the statutes, but you certainly haven't done that. That being said, I think if you're familiar with this property and this building particularly, this is a building that had run down quite a bit. My client has made significant investments in his other properties in the area and wants to try to bring this building back into prominence and beauty. I think the quality of the work my client does speaks for itself. And certainly I think the building we're proposing is much more aesthetically pleasing than the building that stands there today. We have gone through all your department review comments. We've addressed them all. We have sufficient water supply and sanitary service. We're fully protected by fire, safety, and security equipment. As I said, we expect a reduction in overall traffic generation. Certainly no impact to public health, safety, or welfare. No impact to environmental resources, and we've complied with your regulations. And we went above and beyond. We actually amended our application after the fact to add some additional provisions in the event that there was some interpretation of the regulations that we had an issue with compliance. Finally, I think the project is consistent with the Plan of Conservation and Development. It's preserving and enhancing an existing building in Mystic, one that's going to support commerce and tourism. But I think it's important, and I don't think it should be lost, that we're trying to offer family-friendly accommodations in downtown Mystic, something that's just really not offered right now in the marketplace. We think as business people, we're excited about it. We're excited to be able to invite and welcome families into downtown Mystic, and that's what these units are all about. It's a modest project, only 5 units, and certainly I think it's going to be a welcome addition to Cottrell Street. And we will continue to try to have positive relations with our neighbors and address any concerns that may come up during the course of our operations. With that, I'll conclude, but we're available for any questions that you might have.
I just wanted to clarify.
Sure.
The liquor license is just for the hotel residents, correct?
Yeah, so we're not proposing any bar or dining room. It would only be service to the guest rooms.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Have you spoken with the neighbors?
We have a long-standing relationship with the neighbors, and there are certain neighbors who are unhappy with the developments on this block, and Mr. Scheer, I think, has some concerns about that. We have really good relationships with some of them, and we have less ideal relationships with others.
And since you brought it up, this change in the state statute saying that you no longer have to be compliant with the tone of the neighborhood except under certain situations. What are those situations?
Sure, that's a great question. And it's not that we don't have to be compliant. What the regulation says is that you can't consider neighborhood character in your deliberations on special permits, site plans, or variances. That's not something you're allowed to do anymore. If, however, the commission adopts specific physical standards that are quantitative in nature and they can be easily explained, then you can enforce them. But absent in your regulations having specific design standards for particular areas or perhaps the whole community, you are unable to use neighborhood character in your deliberations. And I'll tell you what it's about. Many more wealthy towns, particularly in Fairfield County, have used the neighborhood character issue to stop the development of affordable housing. And said that, we have a single family community of, multi-million-dollar houses, and how dare you put multifamily units in our community They don't fit the neighborhood character, and so therefore we deny. And so the legislature, in their wisdom, and you can agree or disagree with that, has said commissions are no longer allowed to use neighborhood character in their decision-making because it is an amorphous concept. They do give you an out, though, and they say, if you take the time to create, and I'm actually working in Old Lyme right now. I've been hired by the town of Old Lyme to help them on this for an overlay district. An actual guidebook that has specific things you must have on your buildings. You must have this type of a roof pitch. You must have this kind of a shingle. You must have this type of siding. If you have specific enumerated physical standards that are in your regulations, then you can actually use neighborhood character. So it might be something the commission wants to look at. And it could be something townwide or maybe just specific districts. But right now, you can't enforce that.
Thank you. Very, very interesting.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you again for your time today. And if you have any other questions, we'd be more than happy to answer them. And I just point out again, we agreed to provide additional detail on the elevator tower to break it up. And we also agreed to modify the outdoor open air terrace along the left-hand side of the building toward the Hoxie House.
Northwest corner to mirror the southwest corner.
Yes, yes, exactly. So we're amenable to both of those changes. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Keith?
Yeah, so like I said before, that section 6614, allows flexibility with the bulk modifications for rehabilitating a building like this. It's really sort of a great tool in our regulations, which has led to the revitalization of a lot of historic buildings in town over the years, like the Mystic Packer building, the old school in Mystic, the old Higgins Pharmacy building in Pawcatuck. So it's something that looks like it was adopted in 1978. Has had a lot of positive benefits here. They've also applied for that height exemption for the elevator shaft, which requires a special use permit, which they're getting anyway here. It meets the requirements of that. It's not like a variance where you need to prove hardship that you must have the elevator shaft there, but it's a design feature that triggers a special use permit. We got comments from the town engineer, and there's not much for him to comment on because there's barely anything on the site plan. He had some comments there, which I believe, are a recommended stipulation. ADRB recommended approval of this here. They had a couple stipulations to consider carrying around. It's sort of similar to what you were talking about on the balcony. They had the stipulation to consider carrying around the ground level fenestration around the north and south corner. So they were thinking the same thing on the ground level. And to evaluate the merits of darkening the color of the penthouse level. To make it sort of, blend into the background a bit more from the street. Police Commission had no public safety issues. WPCA didn't have any issues, and the applicant's engineer stated in the application that this is expected to have less flow to the sewers. As far as the recommended stipulations here, number one was that the final plans shall be reviewed to the satisfaction of the town engineer. Number two, final plans shall be recorded in the town's land evidence records after commission signature. Number three was the applicant shall provide a flood evacuation plan to the Department of Planning prior to issuance of a zoning permit, which shall be recorded in the town's land evidence records. And new ones for tonight are number four, the balcony shall be extended around the northwest corner. And number five, horizontal trim shall be added to the elevator shaft.
So can I just, I'm sorry, Keith, I might have misunderstood what you said. So there was a recommendation from the Architectural Review Board that on the first floor, the kind of the facade on Cottrell Street is continued around the building, and that on the fourth floor, the the boarding is darker in color. And was that, were those modifications made? Because I'm looking at the staff report and I'm not seeing those modifications. And I'm not sure I see them on what's been presented.
No, the
But they might
plans,
not have been able to update.
the plans weren't revised to meet that,
Oh,
but those were recommendations that they had.
Oh, how come?
Great question. So after the ADRB, we reviewed both of those issues.
Yeah.
There are, if you've been out to the building, the grades are very different on each side of the building. So you have the alleyway to the left, and then you have a raised planter bed on the right. You can't wrap that fenestration around on the raised planter bed.
A bunch of gas meters or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
South
It's utility, but there's also some structural issues on the front of the building. And so what we did is we looked at, Mark Spruance, who spoke before, is our general contractor. There are issues with carrying the fenestration around the corners of the building with the support of the front wall of the building. And so we rejected that consideration. We're open to changing the color of the fourth floor. We looked at it, we thought stepping off, and now particularly with the northwest corner, pulling that back too, the whole reason they suggested it, and it was actually Mr. McKinley who suggested it, is as an additional way to reduce mass, you might consider darkening the siding on the floor to make it match more like the sky than the rest of the building. We're open to that. If you guys think that that's a great idea, we're happy to try to darken that the fourth floor if you think there's value there. We didn't think there was a lot because we had done enough with the terrace, but we had interpreted those as things to consider in your design. First one we can't do, but second one we could do if you think it's worthwhile.
Well, that's the wordage is right here, consider and evaluate merits.
And I think, that if I can say, I think that their willingness to extend that terrace balcony kind of addresses that probably better than the darkening color. I think that this is a better way to approach it.
The darkening color was all about mass.
Right.
Ways to try to reduce mass.
Better with mass, extending the balcony than you do with the color.
They could do both.
Reduce the mass.
They could do both. This
Well,
is
but
a
I'm
big building.
No, understood. I'm just saying, I think what they have proposed with the terrace balcony would meet what I would think would be required. That's just an opinion,
Yeah.
that's all.
And making that fourth floor dark would be like having a cloud hovering over.
Yeah,
You know,
I don't know. I don't know. I was just asking. I have no idea.
I mean, if you want to, there's nothing that says that you couldn't put in a condition to continue to consider it. I mean, we'll take another look at it. We looked at it with some darker trim and darker siding up there. We didn't think it looked as attractive, but we'd take a second look at it if you'd want us to consider it. I mean, you could make a condition like that as well.
What color is it right now proposed?
White.
White.
Off-white? I mean, there's 15,000 shades of white. AZAC bright white?
It's the exact. It's not the exact color, though, right, of the clapboard. It's not. It's a different color.
Clapboard's more of an off-white, the trim is more white.
And then the fourth floor is white.
Yes.
It's a bright white.
So maybe a gray.
So it does stand out.
So it's gray.
But this white cloud, it blends in. It's a blue sky.
Yeah.
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 You can
I
argue that.
think what you're hearing is, this is a big building. It's gonna change the look of Cottrell Street, no matter whether you think it's the best looking building or not the best looking building. We have concerns about mass on Cottrell Street, in downtown Mystic. I mean, everything's going up, everything is just getting bigger and bigger, So what we're trying to do is just, what can we do that satisfies what you need, but somehow makes it so that this does not look like this humongous building on Cottrell Street?
I understand and hear your concerns, and like I said, you have a willing applicant too. If you'd like us to make it darker, we're happy to do it. So that's really your call.
I don't know the answer. And I appreciate that you're the professional.
Sure. I would consider something
I was just
besides
saying
bright
that
white.
they requested, they kind of said, consider it.
You
and
could
what's the
also,
best answer? I don't
it's
know.
allowable to say that the commission would like to see a darker color on the fourth floor to be approved by staff. And so we can come in and show it to Keith, and Keith says, hey, yeah or nay. I
Good
like
idea.
it or I
A
don't.
lot of responsibilities on those shoulders, Keith.
Right, right.
I like that, that's a,
Dove white, you know, I don't know, linen white, what are you
Right.
gonna go with? No.
Technically, yeah, neon purple is darker than white, so.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great,
I'm thinking
yeah.
like a
Yeah.
light gray might be really nice.
And
Stonington
again,
fog
I
gray.
don't know. I was just wondering why you didn't.
Yeah, we absolutely looked at it, and we talked about it, and we looked at some samples, and we said, "Geez, we don't think it looks as good, but hey, listen, at the end of the day, we want to make a building that you guys are proud of too. That's what my client's all about."
Okay. Let's crank that into stipulation number
Yeah, so that'd be
5.
number,
Or
actually, the
6.
stipulation is number 6.
Okay,
Yeah.
Thank you again.
thank you.
Maybe you can go back to the architectural review board, Keith, and ask them once they give you the example or something.
What's that? I can't.
I said maybe Keith could just consult with somebody on the architectural review board and said, hey, here's an option, is
Yeah.
this better, or meet, you know, make it.
Okay. Any other public input? One last chance, okay. There, motion to close, any more questions or discussion at this
Keith,
point?
I just have one question, it's just a general question. So this was given, the 4th floor, in 2007? 7. So that's 15 years. So when something is not acted upon, is there a time span limitation?
Well, special use permits are basically valid forever as long as they're recorded, which this one was. The site plan element of it does expire and has to come back to the commission. So it's sort of like a two-pronged answer is, the legal guidance we've been given. That the basic ability to do it is still there, but you might have to come back to the commission for a site plan approval.
For the execution.
For the execution of it.
Okay. So there's no way the commission can say, in 2007, you had permission for 4 floors, but in 2022, 15 years later, because you did not act on that, it's no longer granted.
No, and another factor is that the state statutes keep changing all the time regarding how long permits are valid for. So there are some changes now where things are good for up to 19 years. So, I always have to go back and read all the changes to see what applies to what approval granted when.
I'm sure we're going to hear about it.
The latest version.
2007 approval did not expire by 2011. So 2011 was the date of extension for the 14 years, which would get you to 2000, well, it's after the 12 years, so it's actually 2026. But as Keith just pointed out, it's gone another 5 years, so it's actually 2031.
Okay,
So,
all right.
but he's absolutely right.
Okay, thank you. It's just something to.
Yeah, it used to be more simple. Things were good for 5 years.
5 years is good. 5 years is good.
That's crazy.
Thanks. And again, thank you for that.
Any other discussion before we hear
I
more?
just have one quick question.
Okay.
Parking during construction, when will the workers park? Do you see a lot? I mean.
He was asking about parking during construction.
So I've worked on the end, we did the main end and we've done some other renovations on the end. We've been there on and off for the last 5 years. And we park wherever there's parking spaces.
Okay,
And a lot of our work gets done in the winter. This building will go year-round. It can't be done in one winter. And we just have to find parking spaces. So.
All right.
But are they typically on the street? Because I have heard one comment from a merchant complaining about construction parking on the Cottrell Street.
Yeah, so we ask,
I don't know
we actually go to the police and tell them we're starting construction, and the police are very accommodating and sometimes will give us a couple spots and allow us to park there. We're trying to work for a living, and we have to park fairly close to the site.
Sure.
We can also use For example, the alley that's there, we'll probably be using that area, and we may do some staging off-site. So it's difficult to work in downtown Mystic, so. Thank
Okay.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good question.
Make a motion, we need to close the hearing.
What's that, Brian?
Make a motion to close the hearing.
Thank you. Do I hear a second to close the meeting?
Second.
Thank you, Fred. Any discussion on closing the meeting? All those in favor?
Aye.
Great. What's the commission's,
I think we have two things that, first
Yeah,
one was
the
the decision on
waivers.
the waivers.
well, first, is there any other discussion that we need to bring to the table? I think we've covered everything?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, go ahead.
Oh,
Well, we
sure.
don't have a proposal, so we can't discuss it.
Right.
Yeah.
Make a motion to approve the waivers as requested by the applicant.
Again, what were they?
Let's see.
Waivers is listed.
I think it was the height.
Would you like the list?
Thank you.
Page 17.
We've got the site plan requirements, water impact study, sewer impact study, site drainage analysis, erosion control report, traffic impact study, archaeological study, soils report, test pit data and mapping.
Thank you.
Do I
A
hear
few
a
others.
second? Do I hear a second on the waivers?
Second.
Any discussion on that waivers? All those in favor?
Aye.
Make a motion to approve the special use permit with the stipulations as we discussed here.
Thank you, Ryan. Is there a second?
Second.
You're on a roll.
Thank you,
You're on a
Gary.
roll.
A dramatic pause there. Is there discussion on these 6 stipulations? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved.
Thank you very much for your time tonight. Hope you get home at a reasonable time.
Thank you. Do I hear a motion to close?
Make a motion to close the meeting.
Thank you. Thank you, Fred. Meeting closed.
Second.
All right, don't go before we find.